The scene opens at the Devil's Palace, another name for the Murim demonic alliance, where a large crowd of people has gathered, much to the surprise of a newcomer. A bearded man explains that they are willing to accept anyone, regardless of their faction or sect, and teach them demonic martial arts as long as they have talent. He wonders what fool would pass up such an opportunity. His companion laments that he is too old, or he would have applied himself. The bearded man's attention is drawn to a strange sight in the crowd, and he wonders if someone has died, but his companion scoffs at his conclusion, reminding him that the Devil's Palace's competition of the 10 has not yet begun. The bearded man again asks who the young man is who looks like an undertaker. All eyes turn to the young man walking through the crowd. This young man, named Bo Unsol, is thinking of his grandfather and that this is just the beginning. Unsol recalls his grandfather, who gave him this name after finding him abandoned in a field of snow. Unsol continues to reminisce, remembering how he learned the profession of burying the dead from his grandfather, who was also an undertaker. He remembers telling his grandfather that the body belonged to an expert in a sword fighting style that was extremely fast, explaining that what made him think so was his observation of the high fitness of his left leg muscles, especially the front part of his calf, which is a characteristic feature of practitioners of this type of sword fighting style. The grandfather smiles, impressed by his grandson's keen observation, and praises him, saying that he is a gifted undertaker from heaven. Unsol remembers how difficult his life was, and how people hated him because of his profession, but he was happy to be with his grandfather who was his support in all the hardships he went through, until that fateful day. One night, the grandfather noticed someone outside, and sighed, saying that good people never seek you out, and those who do are never good. While Unsol was sleeping, his grandfather woke him up, and suggested they play a game of who can pretend to be dead best. Then he promised him that he would buy him the clothes and the sword he had always wanted if he played well this time, and his face lit up with joy. His grandfather asked him to try to hold on until sunrise, which surprised him. After that, the grandfather left the house carrying his sword. Outside, a mysterious man was waiting for Unsol's grandfather, and the man addressed the grandfather, saying that he had hidden well like a rat. Then he revealed the grandfather's true identity, calling him by the name Bo Ganyang, the seven-branched demonic blade. The grandfather admitted that he had not heard that name in a long time. The mysterious man berated him for abandoning his position as deputy master of the palace, to live a miserable life in a menial job like burying the dead. The grandfather corrected the mysterious man's misconception, explaining that he had not taken up this profession to live a miserable life, but to atone for his sins. Then he offered him his life, asking him to kill him elsewhere so that the innocent would not be harmed, and the mysterious man laughed mockingly. The mysterious man agrees to the grandfather's request to move to another location and warns him not to try to escape. Meanwhile, Unsol is hiding nearby, and he sighs with relief, believing that the danger has passed. But he soon begins to tremble and thinks that he can no longer bear it, for although he desperately wants the official uniform and the sword his grandfather promised him, the cold has become unbearable. Unsol comes out of his hiding place and wonders where his grandfather is, who used to wait for him after their game was over, and he guesses that the law enforcement officers have summoned him again. He is angry at those men who do not see undertakers as human beings. Unsol advances in the place to be confronted by a horrific scene, and he runs quickly, to find his grandfather lying on the ground with blood streaming from his eyes. Unsol screams, calling out to his grandfather, and rushes to him, asking him in shock what happened, but he only apologizes to him. The grandfather tells him that his time has come, and tries to ask him not to continue in the profession of burying the dead, but he coughs up blood before he can finish his sentence. Unsol begs him to stop talking, but he insists that he listen to him carefully, and asks him never to think of revenge. The crying Unsol refuses his request, saying that he cannot forgive those who did this to him. He tells him that he would rather die and go with him, reminding him of his constant words that there is no difference between hell and this world, and that he would rather be in hell with him than stay here without him. As a final request, the grandfather begs him to go far away and tells him that he was very happy with the time they spent together. Then he breathes his last and falls to the ground. Unsol's face is filled with tears, not believing what is happening. After a while, Unsol stands before his grandfather's body, which he has prepared for burial. He touches his face and realizes that his request not to take revenge was to protect him, but he decides that he cannot obey him this time. He begins to examine his wounds carefully and notices that his arms have been cut off at the same time, in a rare movement of cutting from top to bottom. He discovers that the attacker changed the movement in the middle to stab his eyes as well. Unsol deduces that this strange sword style must be from the demonic sect and identifies it as the Tianchu yoga technique. He then moves on to examine his back and finds 93 traces of the use of hidden weapons, which leads him to the conclusion that the attacker did not have help from anyone, but used a tool that could launch hundreds of hidden weapons at once. Finally, he notices a strange discoloration under his tongue and nails. Unsol deduces that this discoloration occurs when poisoned with a deadly poison that causes the flesh and blood to rot. Based on everything he has seen, he arrives at the specifications of the killer. He is a person who belongs to the demonic sect, has learned the Tianchu yoga technique, possesses a high-quality hidden weapon, and uses deadly weapons that cause the flesh to rot and the blood to spoil. And Unsol believes that there cannot be many people who fit these specifications. He looks at his grandfather's body with determination and vows that he will find the killer no matter what it takes. Back in the present, Unsol arrives at the registration office at the Devil's Palace and writes his name, Bo Unsol, from the Ganyang clan. The employees mock him, wondering what kind of rural clan Ganyang is, and they guess that he probably got scared when he saw the consent forms to give up bodily autonomy. While one of them rudely demands that he put his fingerprint or leave, Unsol bites his thumb to draw blood, to the astonishment of the employees. Unsol thinks that the moment his grandfather died, his life was shattered, and he has nothing left but the path of revenge. Then he presses his bloody thumb on the registration paper. He thinks that this competition will be his first step towards revenge. The long history of conflict between the orthodox and unorthodox sects for control of the Murim world is then reviewed. The orthodox sects, which seek justice, are led by the Murim Alliance, while the unorthodox sects are centered around the Devil's Palace, which exclusively worships power. The two forces maintained a balance for a long time, but the orthodox sects wanted to gain an advantage, which led to the creation of 18 martial masters, known as the Greatest Good Masters. To counter this new threat, the Devil's Palace decided to devise a way to enhance their power as well, and their plan was to create the 10 Demon Lords. This offer, which required the selection of 10 geniuses regardless of their previous affiliations, and teaching them the martial arts of the 10 demonic sects, attracted many young people who headed to the Devil's Palace. Unsol stands among the crowd, and feels a powerful aura emanating from a considerable number of those present. He thinks that it is likely that among them is someone connected to his grandfather's killer. As the killer is a martial arts master beyond his ability to judge, Unsol realizes that to take revenge on such a figure, he must become a martial arts master himself, and since he has no affiliation or martial arts at the moment, becoming one of the 10 Demon Lords is his only way to become stronger quickly. Suddenly, the applicants look at someone in amazement, as a majestic man with thick white hair and red eyes appears, and announces in a loud voice that his name is the head instructor, Hyuk Ryun-yong, and the attendees recognize him as the bloody-eyed gold dagger. Head instructor Hyuk Ryun-yong continues his speech, explaining that this place is to discover the greatest geniuses from among all the demonic sects, and that only those who pass all the tests prepared for them will become candidates to become one of the 10 Demon Lords. He then announces the first test, in which the Devil's Palace fighters will examine the physical fitness of the participants. The test begins, and the examiners examine the muscles and bones of the applicants with their hands, which puzzles some participants who were expecting a competition or a fight. Unsol notices that those who pass this examination are directed to the next place. When it's Unsol's turn, one of the examiners approaches him, and after touching his arm, he shows signs of shock and despair, and thinks to himself that this young man is finished. Although he is surprised that someone with Unsol's physique is even participating, he feels a real, unmistakable killing intent emanating from him, but he still decides that he cannot let him pass. Unsol is not surprised by the result, as he was aware that all he had learned so far was how to care for corpses, and that he could not pass a test based on physical fitness for martial arts. However, he believed that this was not the end. After the first test is over, one of those who failed cries out, protesting that the test is not fair at all, wondering what the point of holding a competition is in the first place if physical fitness is all that matters. The head instructor replies, explaining that muscles and bones are the most important thing for learning martial arts, and that they held this competition to select talented people from different regions. He then scolds him for daring to complain when he could not even pass the simplest standards. The instructor reassures them that there is no need to worry, and announces that in the second test, he will personally choose those who can learn martial arts well despite their weak physical fitness. He announces the start of the second test immediately, and the head instructor orders all who failed the first test to fight each other until only one person is left alive. Everyone is shocked, wondering how this can be the test, and they are ordered to kill each other when they are all on the same side. But one of the contestants smiles, thinking that this situation is good for him if someone has to be killed. He turns his gaze towards Unsol and a red-haired young man, and raises his huge sword, determined to start with him, and attacks him, shouting for him to die. In a flash, blood splatters. The attacker, whose name is Wee Won Chung, has managed to hit his target. He skillfully kills the red-haired young man, which shocks and terrifies the rest of the participants. Unsol observes the situation and tries to analyze it, noticing that the killer barely avoided the ribs and hit the heart directly, and concludes that although his build is weak, his reflexes and agility are sharp. Wee Won Chung stands, boasting of his deed, and challenges anyone else who wants to meet the same fate to step forward and face him. From a distance, one of the officials comments that Won Chung is acting decisively but lacks common sense, and the head instructor agrees, saying that this place is full of worthless fools. An examiner watches the situation, thinking that in battles like this, showing strength makes you a target, but he believes that what happened will motivate others to move. Indeed, terror and chaos prevail among the contestants, and they begin to attack each other randomly, screaming in panic. The head instructor notes that the young men are not used to death. The fight between the trainees intensifies, as each of them kills the other mercilessly. The head instructor adds that their senses are easily paralyzed when they face their potential end. But he and his assistant soon see that this is not the case for everyone, as it seems that not all of the attendees are fools, for Unsol and another fighter have maintained their composure and sobriety amidst the massacre. Unsol observes what is happening around him, and thinks that these are fools, because they have allowed the fear of death to control them. Unsol analyzes the situation rationally, and realizes that the head instructor's order was to survive until one person remained, which means that the goal is to survive, not to kill. He is confident that he can ensure his survival if he thinks rationally and acts coolly, and he vows that he will live no matter what it takes. Suddenly, one of the fighters approaches him, thinking that he looks pathetic and must have been hiding all this time. Unsol notices the traces of thin, elaborate swords on the bodies around him and concludes that they are the work of a slender sword. The fighter decides that he will kill him himself. He attacks him using a strange weapon, but Unsol dodges it gracefully and hits the box he was carrying. The attacker mocks him, asking what use the box on his back is and whether he is a traveling salesman. Unsol ignores him and picks up some cloth from the ground, and for a moment remembers his grandfather and the Christmas card he gave him, and his red eyes shine with anger and determination. The attacker sees him holding strange tools, and asks him sarcastically what he can do with such a flimsy sword. Before he can complete his attack, the other calm fighter pounces on him and kills him with a single sword strike. This fighter tells Unsol that he doesn't need to thank him, and that having a pathetic person like him around distracts opponents and makes things easier for him. He then adds that although he has keen insight, it seems that he has never learned martial arts, and that he can kill someone like him at any time. From a distance, the head instructor observes the situation, and his attention is drawn to the young man's sword, and he recognizes it as the Sword of Annihilation, the legendary sword of the Black Soul, who was known as the strongest wandering swordsman. His assistant explains that this young man's name is Nyong Wangang, and it is said that he found the secret manual and the Sword of the Black Soul in a secluded valley. He adds that since he only trained from the manual, his techniques lack refinement, and his movements leave many openings. The discussion between the instructors continues, with the assistant mentioning that at present, Nyong Wangang is the only disciple of the Black Soul, and that despite his lack of physical strength, he is a strong candidate to be one of the 10 demon lords, and may even be the winner of this test. The head instructor agrees, adding that although Wangang is still a novice who is not worthy of carrying the Sword of Annihilation, there does not seem to be anyone stronger than him among those present, unless something completely unexpected happens. After a long time and the end of the fierce battle, only 2 people are left alive in the arena full of corpses, Nyong Wangang and Unsol. Wangang stands in the training ground and expresses his surprise that Unsol is the one who managed to survive until the end. He then turns to him and challenges him, saying that if he kills him, he will also become a candidate to be one of the 10 demon lords, and invites him to attack him. Unsol looks at him calmly and thinks that although he realizes that Wangang is the strongest here, he has already discovered his weakness, and he is confident that he can win against him without a doubt. After studying his fighting style from the corpses he left behind, Wangang jumps up from his place and sarcastically offers to test his skills a little, then launches a violent attack on him. Unsol dodges his successive blows with skill, so he only suffers superficial wounds. Wangang mocks him, saying that all he is good at is clumsy dodging, and that it is impressive that he has held out so far. The head instructor and his assistant watch the fight, and they notice that although Unsol seems to be getting beaten up helplessly, he is actually moving his body at the last moment of each blow to avoid receiving a fatal injury. The head instructor realizes in amazement that Unsol has memorized Wangang's attack patterns by examining the corpses, and he admires his amazing level of observation. Unsol addresses Wangang calmly despite his blood, and tells him that his sword techniques are pathetic, and that after all this barrage of attacks, all he has done is cut his flesh. And his words shock him. The instructors are amazed at his audacity to provoke him, realizing that despite his good dodging, launching a counterattack is a completely different matter, especially with his slender body, which will make it difficult to deliver an effective blow. Wangang is angered by his words, and tells him that he was planning to let him live a little longer, but his arrogance has made him decide to grant him his wish to die quickly. He shouts that he will grant his wish and prepares to deliver a finishing blow. Unsol sees the attack coming, and realizes that his chance will come only once. He remembers what he discovered while examining the corpses, which is that his finishing blow always targets the opponent's vital points, specifically the heart and head. He had deduced that when he fights with the intention to kill, his sword inevitably goes towards the upper part of the opponent's body. Accordingly, when one gang rushes towards him, aiming for his head, Unsol quickly ducks and dodges the blow, and directs his counterattack towards his neck, exploiting the weakness he had discovered. In the midst of the fight, Unsol recalls his knowledge of the Tian-Tu vital point, a weak point that is difficult to strengthen even for martial arts masters, and he remembers that if a child hits it with all his strength, an adult can lose consciousness instantly. Unsol uses this knowledge and delivers his decisive blow, and directs his small sword towards Wangang's neck. Wangang stands with blood dripping from him, then falls to the ground, and thus Unsol is the victor of the duel. The exhausted and blood-stained Unsol stands, wondering if it's over. The instructors watch the scene in shock, and the assistant comments that what happened was a completely unexpected variable, while the head instructor expresses his disappointment, as he had high expectations for the Black Soul's sword art. He then announces in a loud voice that Bo Unsol has passed the second test. As soon as he hears the news, Unsol falls into one of his memories and loses consciousness, and enters a dream in which he sees his grandfather calling him. He runs towards him happily, telling him where he is. But when he reaches him, the grandfather tells him that he cannot see him. The dream suddenly turns into a nightmare, where he sees his grandfather's disfigured face, confirming that he cannot see his form at all, and he wakes up terrified. Unsol wakes up to find himself in a strange place, surrounded by young fighters of different ages. Unsol finds himself inside a ship, and realizes that he has fainted from losing too much blood. He notices that his severe injuries have been treated, and he no longer feels any pain. So he guesses that a famous doctor befitting the status of the Devil's Palace has treated him. He looks around to see the rest of the survivors and notices that they have strong physiques, and he recognizes some of the faces, so he concludes that they are the ones who passed the first test. He feels their looks of disdain, but he sees that this is to be expected. The ship's door opens and everyone is told to get off, and one of the officials announces that they have reached the next test area, which is Hell Island. The candidates follow the official to the ominous-looking island, and there he points to a group of caves and tells them that they will sleep in them. He orders them to put their previous clothes and weapons aside, and to wear the new clothes and swords that have been prepared for them, and adds that they are free to choose the cave that suits them. One of the survivors says that he found a cave and found it suitable and comfortable, contrary to his expectations. Meanwhile, a fight breaks out between two candidates over the right to one of the caves, but others intervene to break up the dispute. Unsol watches them and thinks that these people have no idea what happened in the second test, and that they are all complacent and relaxed. He also notices that many of them were wearing expensive clothes, and he wonders if they are all from prestigious clans. Unsol reflects on what happened and concludes that the second test was a way to get rid of people who could be easily killed. Meanwhile, the official who supervised the distribution of the caves approaches him and blames him for his slowness, and urges him to hurry up and choose. The official thinks to himself that although Unsol's sharp gaze caught his attention, he did not expect his survival, and he is now curious to see his next decision. Unsol points to a dark and unattractive cave, announcing that he has chosen it. The official mocks him, saying that he has chosen a place that suits his shabby clothes and that he is disgusted, but the official is impressed by his choice and thinks that he is a true genius, as he knows that although the entrance to the cave looks small and dirty, the inside is spacious enough for training, and its small entrance makes it easy to defend against intruders. The official sees that most people avoid this cave because of its entrance, but Unsol was able to assess the situation accurately, and then asks him to prepare for the next stage. After everyone has put on the new uniform, the official begins to explain the next task. He explains that Hell Island has 10 facilities for teaching martial arts, and in each building they can learn the martial arts of one of the 10 demonic sects. He adds that one is free to learn them all or focus on just one, and that they have complete freedom to organize their schedule, whether by sleeping, playing, learning martial arts, or training on their own. This surprises Unsol, as he remembers the brutality of the second test, and he cannot believe that they will be left to train in peace. Soon, the survivors begin to wonder which martial art they should learn first, and most of them agree on the Fire Rain Sword sect, which they have heard is the strongest. Everyone rushes there. Unsol watches them, thinking that he has also heard that they are the strongest among the demonic sects, and that learning their martial arts would definitely be useful, but he decides that this is not for him, as he has never learned any martial arts before, so he does not need to start with the strongest arts. Unsol thinks about what he really needs now, and takes a different path. Unsol moves in the direction of one of the martial arts training facilities, Unsol arrives at an old and dilapidated building and recognizes it as the Wandering Beast Pavilion. He remembers that the reputation of this pavilion has deteriorated so much that it is barely counted among the 10 demonic sects, and that the only reason for its survival is its history of graduating a considerable number of the strongest martial arts masters of their time. He also remembers that his grandfather had told him about them. Unsol decides to train here, but as he advances, he notices that the ground in front of him is moving. Suddenly, a man's head emerges from the ground. The man introduces himself as Sa Wu, the master of the secret wing of the Wandering Beast Pavilion, and asks him if he has come here hoping to become one of the 10 demon lords. Unsol stands before him and answers respectfully, confirming that he has come to learn the martial arts of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Sa Wu looks him up and down, then laughs and orders him to leave so as not to hasten his death, announcing that he has no intention of teaching martial arts, especially to someone who looks as fragile as him. Unsol replies to Master Sa Wu with confidence, explaining that he heard that if he learned the martial arts of the Wandering Beast Pavilion, he would gain the ability to survive anything. Sa Wu scoffs at his words, expressing his surprise that he knows about martial arts that are on the verge of extinction. He then warns him that even the greatest geniuses find it difficult to learn their martial arts because they begin by modifying the body, and with his current physical condition, he would die within a day. He then orders him to leave since he has understood. Instead of leaving, Unsol bows down completely and places his forehead on the ground. Sa Wu asks him in surprise what he is doing, and Unsol replies that since he has agreed to teach him, he can only offer his respect to his new master. Sa Wu calls him a stubborn fool, but he finally gives in and agrees to teach him. Sa Wu comes out of the ground and assures him not to misunderstand, as he is only teaching him because the Devil's Palace has ordered him to. He then introduces himself again as the master of the Wandering Beast Pavilion, Sa Wu, and asks him to call him Master Sa from now on. Unsol tries to introduce himself, but he interrupts him, saying that he is just trainee number 1. Sa Wu begins the training immediately, and Unsol suddenly finds himself in complete darkness and realizes that he cannot see anything. Sa Wu tells him that he has temporarily sealed his sight using the secret techniques of the Wandering Night Pavilion. He explains that this is a necessary step to learn the Wandering Beast Path, a basic technique that sharpens all the senses and gives its owner beast-like reflexes. He adds that their martial arts are different from others because they change dramatically depending on the person who learns them, and for this reason, mastering the basic technique is very difficult, which has led to a dwindling number of people trying to master it until the pavilion reached its current dilapidated state. But he assures him that if he can master it, he will gain the senses of a wandering beast. Then adds with a sarcastic smile that most people die before reaching this point. Sa Wu tells him that he should get used to the darkness within about an hour, and that he will return to him then. Unsol finds himself alone in the dark, and notices that his other senses have not become sharper as he expected. He realizes that an hour is a very long time, and that he must adapt as quickly as possible. He thinks that countless fighters are competing to become one of the 10 demon lords, and that if he is attacked in this state, he will be completely helpless. At that moment, an attacker descends from above in silence, but Unsol dodges him with an instinctive movement and falls to the ground. Unsol realizes at that moment that with his sight gone, his balance is now the most important thing. During the night, Sa Wu returns to Unsol and thinks sarcastically that young man must be completely lost now. Master Sa Wu returns after an hour and observes Unsol's training and finds his method unique. He thinks that most trainees wait patiently for their other senses to return to work after losing their sight, but in contrast, Unsol moves violently, imagining a phantom enemy to train against. Unsol was moving with complete smoothness in the dark, and Sa Wu concludes that this is the reason for his rapid adaptation to the new situation. He notices that Unsol has gotten used to the dark, and then challenges him to try to dodge his sword. After 3 days of continuous and intense training in the rain, Unsol was still training with Sa Wu. Sa Wu surprises him with a quick move, and strikes Unsol in the stomach with the hilt of his sword, which he was unable to dodge. Sa Wu contemplates the situation and thinks that 3 days have passed, and that it is time for Unsol to start questioning his training style, but he accepts it without any questions. He stops attacking and asks him why he is not curious about how to avoid attacks or the theory behind the training. Unsol replies that he remembers him saying that the essence of the Wandering Night Pavilion's arts is to reach enlightenment on your own, so he assumed that there was a reason for what he was doing. Sa Wu is surprised by his answer and admits that he is right, then tells him enthusiastically to continue training. During the training, Unsol reaches a new stage of awareness, and feels that he can see the path of the coming sword. But he also realizes that he cannot dodge the next attack, so he decides to block it instead. Unsol succeeds in blocking Sa Wu's attack, which surprises him, and he wonders how he was able to block the silent attack. After only 3 days of training, Unsol falls to the ground exhausted, and notes that he couldn't even block the attack properly. Sa Wu approaches him, then offers him a drink from a bamboo flask, and Unsol thanks him. Unsol drinks and is surprised that it is not water, as he feels a huge energy flowing through his body as if the blood he had lost was returning to him. Sa-woo tells him that this is the superior spring spiritual water that he has been saving all his life, but he doesn't feel like he is wasting it on him. Sa-woo thinks to himself with great excitement that he has finally met the genius he has been waiting for all his life. At another time, Unsol's training continues, as Sa-woo challenges him to try to block his attack again. Sa-woo continues to attack Unsol with strong and successive sword strikes, but Unsol was dodging the attacks with difficulty. Suddenly, Sa-woo appeared behind Unsol, expressing his dissatisfaction with Unsol's defensive performance, and suddenly, Sa-woo stops attacking, which leaves Unsol panting and wondering why he stopped. Then Sa-woo bursts into loud laughter, announcing that he has finally found what he has been looking for all this time. At that moment, the seal on Unsol's eyes breaks and he regains his sight. Sa-woo addresses Unsol by his full name and invites him to forget about becoming one of the 10 demon lords and to become instead an official disciple in his pavilion. He promises him that if he does so, he will make him one of the 10 strongest martial arts masters in the demonic sect within 10 years. Unsol thinks about the offer and realizes that Sa-woo is probably not lying about his promise. But he remembers that his grandfather's killer is highly skilled, and he comes to the conclusion that he cannot be satisfied with learning only the martial arts of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Accordingly, Unsol announces his decisive decision that he will become a demon lord. Sa-woo mocks his ambition, and tells him to forget about it if his goal is to learn the arts of all 10 demonic sects, explaining that this is impossible even for someone as talented as the greatest heavenly demon emperor. He explains to him that each martial art suits a specific body structure and type of energy, and that no matter how talented a person is, he cannot learn more than 2 or 3 types of martial arts, and that focusing on one martial art is the fastest way to become the strongest. Unsol apologizes for his insistence, and Sa-woo wonders if there is a way to change Unsol's mind. In the end, Sa-woo gives in and agrees to teach him a different martial art. Unsol is surprised by this, explaining that he has only learned the basics of the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Then Sa-woo surprises Unsol with a quick and decisive attack, but Unsol manages to block the attack on his own. Sa-woo reveals to him that his pavilion's martial arts are not only transmitted through steps or theories, and that Unsol has actually been practicing the wild beast path of his pavilion all this time. Unsol then realizes that all the sword strikes that Sa-woo directed at him were not just training, but were the true forms of the wild beast path. Unsol thanks his master, but Sa-woo refuses his thanks, insisting that he was carrying out the orders of the Devil's Palace. Unsol insists on his gratitude, reminding him of the elixir he gave him, and promises that he will never forget his kindness. Sa-woo tells him to forget about it, explaining that this is the nature of the martial arts world of the Jianghu, where forgetting favors and grudges is always the best option. Then after a moment of silence, Unsol tells him that he will leave. Sa-woo watches Unsol from a distance as he leaves, and wonders to himself in amazement where such a talented person came from, and thinks that a bloody storm will soon sweep through Hell Island. Unsol thinks about his ability to sense that from learning the Wandering Beast path, which made his senses extremely sharp. But he sees that this constant awareness is very tiring even when he is doing nothing, and he feels that he will not be able to rest properly if the situation continues like this. So he decides that he must learn to control his senses and suppress them as much as possible. Unsol begins to focus, trying to control his senses as if he were stopping a drop of water, and after a few moments, he opens his eyes, feeling that this amount of control is enough for now. Unsol pulls out a map and looks at it, and thinks that the Devil's Palace will not keep the trainees on Hell Island just to train them indefinitely. He concludes that the time available to them is about to run out, and if that is the case, then he has no other choice. Unsol decides to head to the strongest sect among the 10 demonic sects, which is the Fire Rain Sword sect, founded by the Fire Rain Sword Emperor, Juk Hua-woon, who was a rival of the greatest heavenly demon emperor 700 years ago. Upon arriving at the Fire Rain Sword sect, Unsol finds that their martial arts hall looks like a majestic palace compared to the modest, Wandering Beast Pavilion. When he approaches the door, a man opens it and wonders who the visitor is at such a time. Unsol realizes that he is a martial arts instructor in this sect, and he bows respectfully, announcing that he has come to learn their martial arts. The instructor asks him to follow him, and explains to him that their sword arts are the most extensive of all the demonic arts, but they are also the most time-consuming. He adds that those who arrived half a month ago have already completed the elementary test and moved on to the intermediate test, and then asks him why he was so late. Unsol tells him that he was learning martial arts at the Wandering Beast Pavilion for the past half a month. The instructor is surprised and asks him if he means that he learned the Wandering Beast path, and Unsol confirms it. The instructor thinks to himself that he knows this boy is a genius, but it is impossible that he has mastered the wandering beast path in just half a month. He concludes that what most likely happened is that Sa Wu got annoyed with him and dismissed him quickly, and he sees that there is nothing to be done about it. After that, he introduces himself, saying that his name is Jin Gak, and he is in charge of the beginner's test, and he asks him to call him teacher. Jin Gak asks Unsol if he really intends to learn the Fire Rain sword art, suggesting that it might be better for him to go to another test. Unsol thanks him for his concern, but he insists on learning the arts of the Fire Rain sword sect. Jin Gak agrees to his request, and then shows him a large scroll, explaining that it is the introductory form and the practical method of the 13 forms of Fire Rain, and he asks him to study it and practice on his own. Unsol looks confused and wonders what he is supposed to do with it. Jin Gak turns around in disapproval and asks him if he means that he cannot read a sword manual, and Unsol admits that he cannot, explaining that he has never learned swordsmanship before coming here. Jin Gak freezes in his tracks in a state of shock, then asks Unsol again to make sure if it is true that he has not learned swordsmanship his entire life. He thinks to himself that his records do indeed indicate that he has only used Fire Rain so far, and that even in the second test, he was not using a specific sword style, but he still finds it hard to believe that he cannot even perform the most basic fundamentals, which are the sword steps. On the other hand, he remembers his amazing observation skills and quick reflexes during the second test, as well as the insight he showed when choosing his cave. Jin Gak realizes that if he has reached this level while still being a complete blank slate, then if he is taught properly, his potential will be immense. Jin Gak changes his strategy and suggests that even if he cannot see the sword steps, he can read, and he asks him to read what is written on the scroll. Unsol reads the words aloud: complete relaxation of the body, a smooth flow in one entity, and then repeats the first part about relaxing the body. Jin Gak explains to him that this means that he must relax and use his body flexibly when performing swordsmanship, with a special focus on relaxing his torso and waist. Unsol tries to apply the instructions, and he bends into a strange position, and Jin Gak thinks that it is ironic that he has to teach such basics in a place dedicated to choosing the 10 demon lords. He asks him to stand properly again, and corrects his posture, explaining that when his body is tense, his torso is also tense, and that he must control his mind and relax it so that everything flows smoothly in one motion. Unsol responds immediately, and his stance stabilizes. Jin Gak is surprised by the speed of his understanding and correction of his posture as soon as he spoke. He tells him with a satisfied smile that his stance is now sufficient, and that he will teach him the 13 forms of Fire Rain immediately. Jin Gak begins to explain the movements to him, and Unsol imitates them with amazing accuracy and speed. Jin Gak confirms his suspicions, and realizes that this boy is truly talented. After the training is over, he tells him that he must now imagine an enemy in front of him and use the 13 forms of Fire Rain, explaining that this is the test that will qualify him to move on to the intermediate hall, and that its purpose is to see the sword intent inherent in his basic movements. Unsol realizes that the opportunity he has been waiting for has come sooner than he expected, and that he must prove himself here and now. He closes his eyes and focuses, imagining an enemy he must defeat. He suddenly opens his eyes and unleashes the first technique of the 13 forms of Fire Rain, the unparalleled cyclone. Jin Gak watches him with interest, and Unsol continues with the second and third techniques, the floating misty clouds. Jin Gak looks on in amazement, and wonders if what he is seeing is really the forms of Fire Rain. He remembers that the floating misty clouds technique is supposed to be a soft and graceful sword technique, similar in its movement to the movement of clouds and the spread of mist. But the way Unsol uses it is strangely sharp and deadly. Jin Gak wonders in amazement if Unsol is consciously changing the movements, as changing the basic movements of a sword technique that has been passed down through generations is something that only a great master can do. He notes that these modified sword movements are filled with a violent killing intent, as if he were facing the enemy of his master or parents. He thinks that the fighting style of the Fire Rain sword sect, which is considered the orthodox path among the sword paths, has changed in this radical way, and he wonders what kind of life Unsol has lived to carry all this. At the same time, Unsol feels strange as well, as he notices that the flow at his fingertips changes the sword paths as he wishes. He wonders if the wandering beast path is the reason for this, and he realizes that the more he uses the forms of Fire Rain, the sharper the senses he has acquired from the wandering beast path become. He thinks about fully integrating the two styles, but he hesitates, realizing that if he does so, it will produce a completely different swordsmanship style and will not be the 13 forms of Fire Rain required for the test. He decides that he must hurry and return to the basics of the original sword. Suddenly, the image of the enemy in his mind becomes clearer, and he freezes in place when he realizes that it is the bastard who killed his grandfather. Unsol's anger flares up, and he rushes forward with all his might, unleashing the 7th technique of the 13 forms of Fire Rain, the Heart of the Four Seas. He launches a fierce attack, but the opponent dodges it. Unsol realized that his imaginary opponent is faster than anyone he has fought so far. Then he begins to imagine the opponent attacking him. He decides that he cannot give him any opportunity to attack, and that he must use all the remaining techniques he has at once. He pours all his strength into his attack, executing a series of devastating blows, but the opponent blocks all his attacks and cuts off his hands. Unsol imagines the attack, cutting off both his hands without being able to avoid the attack or even block it. After the attack is over, Unsol stands panting, having completely exhausted his energy. Jin-gak watches him and thinks that in the end, he has lost to his enemy. But he approaches him and tells him that he has passed the test, and he looks at him in confusion. Jin-gak explains that what is being tested in the elementary hall is the trainee's understanding of the sword and his ability to execute the 13 forms of fire rain in a real fight, and he assures him that he has definitely proven that. He returns his sword to him and tells him that his performance of the forms of fire rain was amazing, and he invites him to go to the intermediate hall. Unsol thinks about the teacher Jin-gak and realizes that it must have been annoying for him to teach someone who knows nothing about swordsmanship, but he still taught him and showed him everything step by step. Unsol thanks instructor Jin-gak for all the time he spent with him, and he smiles and encourages him to continue working even harder in the future. He then adds a warning, telling him that his sword carries a particularly strong killing intent and advises him to be careful not to be controlled by this intent. Unsol bows respectfully and leaves, and here Jin-gak fully realizes that he was telling the truth and that he had indeed learned the Wandering Beast path in just 2 weeks. He thinks that perhaps because of his incredibly fast learning speed, he has moved on to the intermediate hall much faster than he expected. He admits to himself that at first he was not sure if he would be able to reach the intermediate hall, but now he is absolutely certain of it. As Unsol opens the doors to the next hall, Jin-gak thinks about the instructor of the intermediate hall, Chun Wangang, and expects that although Wangang might reject Unsol at first, he will eventually become obsessed with him. Unsol enters the intermediate hall, and instructor Wangang notices him and addresses him, saying that it seems he has just passed the beginner's hall. He then mocks him, adding that if he took more than 20 days to understand 30 forms of Hua Wu, then he is wasting his time here. Unsol explains that he was late because he spent the first 15 days in the Nangya Pavilion. Wangang deduces from his words that he is claiming that his time in the beginner's hall was not actually slow, and thinks to himself with contempt that he must be one of those who fled while trying to master the difficult beast path. Wangang orders him to sit down, expressing his doubt in his ability to keep up with the others. Wangang begins the lesson, explaining that the thunderous fire rain sword consists of fast movements, and that those who are not skilled with the sword will end up hurting themselves. He adds that this martial art is difficult to use in a real fight, just like the 13 forms of fire rain. Yet it is just a basic martial art that they must learn at this stage. He emphasizes that their primary focus will not be on winning, but on honing their swordsmanship. After that, he asks one of the trainees, named Byok Han Seong, to step forward and choose an opponent for a duel. Han Seong asks if he is free to choose anyone, and the instructor confirms it. So Han Seong points directly at Unsol. Wangang tried to object, but Han Seong reminds him that he said he could choose anyone. Wangang gets angry and calls Han Seong a fool, wondering how he expects to test his sword against someone who has just finished the elementary hall training, and orders him to choose someone else. Unsol intervenes, saying that he doesn't mind and will face him. He explains that he learned to use the sword from instructor Jin-gak, and believes that he will learn faster if he tests his sword against others. Wangang thinks that Unsol is just trying to protect his pride with his limited skills, but he publicly agrees, saying that knowing one's own abilities is a necessary skill, and he hopes that Unsol is skilled enough to reach the advanced hall. Han Seong sees this as a golden opportunity to stand out among the geniuses. If he kills this newcomer, he will be able to establish his position. The two opponents stand facing each other, and Han Seong tells Unsol that he has courage, but he needs more than that to survive in the Murim world. Then he orders Wangang to start the duel. The duel begins with a fierce attack from Han Seong, but Unsol dodges it with skill. Han Seong continues his attack, and their swords clash powerfully. Through this clash, Han Seong feels the weakness of Unsol's resistance, and he realizes with a sarcastic smile that he is indeed a complete novice. Han Seong laughs out loud, mocking his foolish opponent, then announces that he will show him the real, thunderous fire rain sword. Han Seong launches a series of fast attacks, but he is surprised that Unsol dodges all his blows with ease. From a distance, instructor Wangang watches the situation and thinks that Byok Han Seong is not skilled in using the sword. In contrast, he notices that Unsol not only dodges the blows with speed, but also seems to predict every move, which raises his suspicions about the possibility of him having learned the Wandering Beast Path. One gang dismisses this idea, realizing that although the Wandering Beast Path is the basic martial art of the Wandering Beast Pavilion, it is extremely difficult and can only be mastered by the most skilled masters, and it is impossible for anyone, even a genius gifted from heaven, to learn it in just 2 weeks. One gang decides that he cannot judge Unsol's skills just by his dodging, and that this duel is meant to test his skills in using the sword, not his reflexes. Unsol stops dodging and begins to counterattack, using the 13 forms of fire rain, which shocks the rest of the trainees. Han Seong scoffs at his opponent's use of a beginner's technique, and thinks that he can dodge it with his eyes closed, but he notices that Unsol's version of the technique is slightly different. Han Seong is surprised when Unsol's blow penetrates his defense and hits him. Han Seong becomes furious, wondering if Unsol has been hiding his skills all this time and is using a modified version of the forms to mock him. He guesses that Unsol is doing all this to attract the instructor's attention and move on to the advanced hall immediately. Han Seong realizes that if the situation continues like this, he will be the one who looks like a fool. He shouts in anger, declaring that he will be the one to go to the advanced hall, and unleashes his clan's sword style, the Asura sword style, using its deadly technique, the blood-shattering strike. Instructor One Gang notes that this is a deadly move from the Asura sword sect, but he is impressed by Unsol's composure, as he did not lose his balance in such a situation, which makes him reconsider the possibility that he has indeed learned the Wandering Beast Path. Han Seong continues his fierce attack, shouting that this is the end of Unsol, and uses his own special technique, the Protective Bloody Wind Moon, and the two swords collide in a massive explosion of energy. The remaining students and the instructor look on in shock, while Unsol remembers using the 13th and final form of the fire rain forms, Infinite and Boundless. The duel ends with Han Seong falling to the ground with blood streaming from his mouth. The students wonder in horror if he is dead. Unsol calmly sheathes his sword. Instructor One Gang confirms to himself that Han Seong is indeed dead, having received a precise blow to a vital point. One Gang asks Unsol if he was always a disciple of the Wandering Night Pavilion, and Unsol denies it. The instructor asks again, wondering if he is claiming to have fully mastered the Wandering Beast Path in just 2 weeks, and Unsol replies that he only learned the basics. One Gang scoffs at his answer, sarcastically asking if the Wandering Night Pavilion also teaches its disciples to lie these days. Unsol starts to speak, but the instructor interrupts him, saying that he doesn't need excuses, and orders him to clean up the body immediately. The students whisper among themselves, expressing their shock at a murder occurring during a training duel and wondering why the perpetrator is not being punished. One gang shouts at them to be quiet and reminds them that this is Hell Island, not a regular training hall, and that anyone who uses a deadly technique must be prepared to die themselves. Then he announces the resumption of the test. Several other duels take place, and after they are over, One Gang gathers the students who lost and tells them that they have failed the test and must leave immediately to find another martial arts hall. One of them protests, saying that it was just one match and they ask for another chance, but One Gang firmly refuses. He explains to them that they may have passed the initial tests because of their physical fitness, but learning the Fire Rain sword requires talent and potential, as well as shedding blood, sweat, and tears to overcome one's own limits. He tells them that they have failed because they lack these qualities, and then orders them to leave. The failed students leave, and only Unsol remains in the hall. One Gang asks him why he hasn't left, and Unsol asks if he should leave as well. The instructor explains that he won the duel and passed the test, and therefore should move on to the advanced test. Unsol replies that if he has to advance to a higher level, he would rather stay here. One Gang asks him the reason for his decision, and Unsol explains that the only sword technique he has learned is the 13 forms of Fire Rain, and that he has not learned anything yet in the intermediate hall. One Gang thinks that Unsol has learned the Wandering Beast Path and exposed the technique of the Asura sword sect, and yet he claims to have learned nothing. One Gang agrees to teach him the Thunderous Fire Rain sword, which is considered a continuation of the 13 forms of Fire Rain, but he warns him in a harsh tone, saying that he hates small tricks aimed at attracting attention, and that if he sees him using any sword technique other than the forms of Fire Rain, he will cut off his head immediately. One Gang smiles to himself, now realizing how Unsol was able to master the Wandering Beast Path in just 2 weeks. Unsol begins his training immediately, practicing the piercing lightning technique from the Thunderous Fire Rain sword. After a short while, One Gang stops him, saying that it seems he has already grasped the principles of the technique, and Unsol looks at him in confusion. After 4 days, Unsol has mastered the training. Instructor One Gang thinks about the past 4 days he spent training Unsol. He had tested him in every possible way, and confirmed that he was completely lacking in the fundamentals of sword techniques. He was indeed someone who had just begun to learn swordsmanship. However, Gang was very impressed by Unsol's persistence and focus. He trained as if his life would end if he didn't learn martial arts. Gang explains to Unsol that the thunderous fire rain sword is a technique that relies on rapidly twisting the body to sequence movements, adding that all of its movements involve waving the sword around the body, making them impractical in a real fight. Despite this, Gang notices that Unsol tries to use every technique practically, as if he were trying to kill someone. Unsol asks if that isn't the purpose of sword techniques. The instructor replies that demonic martial arts require killing intent, but to reach a higher level of mastery, the fire rain sword abandons the killing aspect. Gang warns Unsol that if he cannot get rid of the killing intent in his mind, he will end up creating a martial art that harms himself. Unsol realizes that the instructor is saying the same thing that instructor Jin Gak told him. Gang admits that in the past, and even now, he too has lived with killing intent in his heart and has killed all who stood in his way. But because of that, he lost his honor and pride, and his martial prowess deteriorated. Gang advises Unsol that techniques aimed at killing may seem like a path to a higher level, but they are actually an obstacle on the endless path of swordsmanship, and he must abandon his killing intent. Unsol remembers his grandfather's words that those who use the sword often have a past full of despair and tragedy, which is why the people of Murim hate to talk about their past. Unsol asks why he is telling him all this, and Gang replies that he has already told him, because he too has lived with murder in his heart. Gang asks for Unsol's name, and he replies, Bo Unsol. Gang realizes that he is the young man Jin Gak mentioned, who survived the second test, and tells him that he has a big problem. He explains that this problem is his lack of martial arts fundamentals. He explains that his rivals have been learning martial arts since they were young, and that if he wants to start learning the fire rain sword properly in the advanced hall, the gap between him and them will only widen. Therefore, he needs to quickly master the basic martial arts to build a solid foundation. Unsol bows, thanking him, and thinks to himself that he is willing to give up even his soul for this opportunity. Upon arriving at the advanced hall, Unsol feels a completely different aura, and senses a different kind of ferocity in the trainees. He notices that no one looks at him with contempt anymore, and realizes that the reason for this is his killing of Byok Han Seong. He thinks about the irony between his previous profession of cleaning corpses, which was despised, and killing people with a sword, which is praised. An old instructor welcomes him, saying that he has heard about him and invites him to sit down because the lesson is about to begin. The instructor announces that because there is a new trainee, he will explain the central reading of the Fire Rain Sword in addition to the 7 teachings. He explains the basic principles. Power must be balanced in every part of the body. Focus on taking a balanced posture. Pull the chest in and push the back out, and do not concentrate all energy into a single blow. Unsol understands these principles and realizes that he would not have grasped them without learning the advanced martial arts in the intermediate hall. The instructor finishes the oral lesson for the day and asks Unsol to follow him. Unsol follows the instructor to a quiet garden. The instructor holds a leafy branch and explains to Unsol that there is a level at which one who does not hold a sword can defeat one who does, explaining that a person at this level no longer needs a physical sword to form sword arts. Suddenly, the instructor attacks Unsol with the branch. The instructor stops abruptly and asks Unsol a hypothetical question. If he were suddenly attacked like this and did not have a sword, how would he respond using sword martial arts? He adds that while Unsol was in the intermediate hall, the trainees here learned the Shining Mysticism, the first form of the Fire Rain Sword, and they are now discussing its theoretical side. He then warns him that if he does not understand his question, he will not teach him, and asks him to answer carefully. Unsol thinks about the question, "If there were no sword in my hand," and then answers that he would use his opponent's sword. Unsol rushes forward, trying to snatch the branch from the instructor's hand, but the instructor calls his choice hasty. Unsol is surprised to find that the instructor has appeared behind him in an instant. Unsol tries to catch up with the instructor, but he dodges all his attempts with ease. Unsol feels frustrated at not being able to even track his movements, and realizes that he must impress him here to be able to stay in the advanced hall. He decides to use the Wandering Beast path to its full potential to read the flow and direction of the instructor's movement. Unsol focuses all his senses, and launches another attack, but the instructor uses his energy to throw Unsol away before he can grab the branch, knocking Unsol to the ground. The instructor catches Unsol before he can get up and laughs loudly, announcing that he has passed the test. Unsol asks in confusion how he passed when he couldn't even touch him. The instructor tells him that he will start learning the Shining Mysticism starting tomorrow, and asks him to come early in the morning before the others, and Unsol agrees. After Unsol leaves, the instructor looks at the branch in his hand, and thinks to himself that a cub remains a wolf in the end. He smiles and says that he has high expectations for him. Later, after that day's lesson is over, Unsol decides to take a walk around Hell Island. He thinks about what happened in the second test and how a fight could break out at any moment here. Suddenly, he senses the presence of several people nearby. He starts counting them and finds 5 people coming out from among the trees. Their leader addresses him, saying that his actions have been strange since he arrived from the intermediate hall and that they are going to teach him a lesson. Another adds that since Unsol was the one who started killing first, he shouldn't blame them for what is about to happen. The leader boasts that the 5 of them are geniuses among geniuses and are known as the 5 peak swords and advises him to prepare well. Unsol thinks to himself that there is another person. The leader of the 5 peak swords shouts at Unsol, but suddenly the leader falls down dead in front of his shocked comrades. At that moment, a red-haired young man named Seo Jinha appears and addresses Unsol, saying that they need to talk. The remaining members of the 5 peak swords are surprised by Jinha's appearance and ask him why he is here. Jinha orders them to leave, saying that he has no business with losers like them. They are angered by his words but decide to withdraw, vowing to return later for revenge. Unsol thinks that this young man is strong, while Jinha calls them cowards. Jinha turns to Unsol and asks him directly which side he is on. Earlier, in the advanced training hall, the instructor tells his students that they have all learned the first technique of the Fire Rain Sword, but true mastery only comes when each of them makes the technique their own. He announces that it is time to see the fiery raindrops they have created. The instructor asks Unsol to start and try his technique. Unsol steps forward and demonstrates his own version of the technique, giving a powerful display of fast and deadly sword movements. The instructor comments that Unsol's technique is very solid and precise, and that he has filled it with killing intent. He allows him to return to his place, and then calls on Seo Jinha. Jinha steps forward, and instead of performing the first technique of the Fire Rain Sword, he demonstrates a completely different technique, which seems to be specifically designed to counter and defeat Unsol's technique. Unsol realizes that this was a warning directed at him. Back to their confrontation, he wonders again about the meaning of Jinha's question about which side he is on. Jinha shouts at Unsol, demanding that he not play dumb. Jinha notices from Unsol's facial expressions and tone of voice that he is not actually lying and that he does not understand what is going on around him. Jinha realizes that the person he is looking for is not Unsol. He feels disappointed because he was hoping for some fun and orders Unsol to stop acting annoyingly from now on. He then threatens him that if he continues to get on his nerves, he will kill him too. Then he leaves. Unsol deduces that Jinha must be a spy and that there is a lot more going on beneath the surface than he had expected. He thinks that he knows that not everyone here is aiming to become one of the 10 demon lords. He realizes that although the opportunity to learn the arts of the 10 demonic sects is amazing, the process of participating in the competition was terribly executed. He comes to the conclusion that this amazing opportunity is at the same time. Unsol completes his thought, realizing that this opportunity is at the same time a trap to catch something. He wonders if there is a spy among them, but decides not to care about it. Whether it's a spy or a demonic martial artist, he is ultimately an opponent he must fight. As the sun sets, he thinks that it will soon begin. Nearby, a mouse is caught in a trap. In the training hall, the instructor announces that that day marks the end of the training. He acknowledges that he is sure many were bored while learning the laws, but he explains that even the most skilled masters who have fought countless battles set aside time to study the laws and principles of martial arts. He adds that knowing a martial art does not mean being able to perform it, and being able to perform it does not mean truly understanding it. He expresses his belief that the analysis of the laws he has taught them will serve as a starting point in their journey in the Murim world, and then wishes them good luck. Suddenly, a bell rings, and a voice echoes throughout, and the instructor announces that the time has come, and orders everyone to head to the rocky mountain in the center of the island. The trainees gather at the mountain, where head instructor Hyuk Ryun-yong confirms that everyone has arrived. Ryun-yong announces the start of the third test, and explains that they must kill each other until only 10 of them remain. He tells them that they can hide or run as they please, but they will not be able to do so forever. As time passes, the areas where they can stay will be restricted, and anyone who is in a forbidden area will be killed by killing demons. Unsol feels the strong killing intent emanating from these demons, and realizes that they must be amazing martial artists. One of the trainees asks if they are allowed to attack the killing demons. Ryun-yong laughs out loud, expressing his pleasure at seeing candidates with such high goals. He confirms that they can, of course, fight them, and even kill them if they can. He then reveals an amazing reward. Anyone who kills a killing demon will immediately become one of the 10 demon lords. The trainees realize that this means that killing one demon is harder than killing all the other participants. Ryun Yong reminds them that they can ally with each other or set ambushes for each other, and shouts that they must kill at all costs if they want to, as this is the path to becoming one of the 10 demon lords. As soon as the test begins, the trainees scatter in all directions. Unsol runs quickly, realizing that he needs to move fast. He knows that he has attracted the attention of many trainees so far, and that if he doesn't get away immediately, there is a high probability that he will be attacked by a group as happened before. Unsol decides that he must first reach a safe place, and the safest place for him is the Wandering Beast Pavilion. He sets off at full speed towards the familiar building. On his way, he notices that the texture of the ground has changed. Suddenly he feels that someone is coming. A wounded young man appears, running and shouting for help, saying that someone is trying to kill him. The young man offers to reward Unsol if he helps him, and Unsol wonders if this is a trick, but he sees that the young man's wounds are real. Unsol senses 3 people chasing him and wonders if they are a team. He doesn't want to get involved, but he realizes that this young man's presence here will reveal his location. At the last moment, Unsol pulls the young man with him into a hidden hole in the ground. The 3 pursuers arrive at the spot and wonder where their prey has gone, insisting that he couldn't have escaped already. The leader decides that he will definitely kill that bastard, and orders his companions to move and search for him because he couldn't have gone far. After they leave, Unsol and the young man emerge from the hole. The young man thanks Unsol warmly, saying that he survived because of him. Unsol thinks that this hole was not just for hiding, and that Master Sa must have prepared it especially for him. Unsol remembers that when he was in the hole, he felt the senses of his wandering beast path expanding more than usual. He was able to sense the sound of them pushing the ground with their feet and the sound of them using their swords, all through the vibrations. He could perceive everything as if he were seeing it with his own eyes. Unsol realizes that this is the wandering beast path that uses vibrations, and this is what Master Sa wanted to teach him. He then turns to the young man. The young man introduces himself as Gum Cho Ryong from the Blood Sect and asks for his name. Unsol ignores him and starts to walk away, and Cho Ryong follows him, calling for him to wait. Cho Ryong explains that he fled into the forest as soon as the 3rd test began, but they followed him relentlessly. He asks Unsol if he can join him, reasoning that he feels he is a trustworthy person because he helped him hide. Without waiting for a response, he takes Unsol's silence as consent and sets off with him happily. Suddenly, the sounds of a fierce battle erupt from a distance. Unsol tells his companion that there is a battle going on there and that they should find another way. Cho Ryong is amazed at Unsol's ability to feel the vibrations and asks him to teach him how to do it. Nearby, a lone fighter faces more than one opponent and vows to avenge his comrades even if he has to sell his soul. The word revenge echoes in Unsol's mind as he feels a familiar kind of hatred in that fighter. Cho Ryong asks him what's wrong, and Unsol announces a change of plans and that they will join that battle, which shocks Cho Ryong. As Unsol advances towards the battle, he parries a surprise blow that was aimed at him. The assassin is surprised and wonders how Unsol was able to stop the forbidden ultimate concealment technique, and asks him if he is also a professional assassin. But with a quick move, Unsol skillfully kills the assassin. Unsol remembers how he easily dealt with one of the assassins, and thinks that the concealment technique they use would have been very annoying if he hadn't learned the wandering beast path. Meanwhile, Cho Ryong screams in terror at the sight of blood. Unsol thinks that if he helps this fighter get rid of the assassins, he might tell him about the feeling of achieving revenge. The assassins decide to end it quickly, and one of them tells the fighter that he will kill him quickly out of respect for being the last one alive. But before he delivers his blow, Unsol intervenes and blocks it. The assassins are shocked, wondering where this person came from and if there are more of their enemies. They decide that they will kill Unsol as well. A fierce fight breaks out, and Unsol kills one of them. As Unsol and the avenging fighter fight side by side against the assassins, and they finish them off one by one. Blood splatters everywhere, and the avenging fighter delivers the final blow to the last assassin. He laughs madly, covered in blood, and whispers that he has finally gotten his revenge. Then he falls to the ground. Cho Ryong asks Unsol if it's over now. At that moment, Cho Ryong approaches Unsol and tells him that he is skilled but should not let his guard down. He then suddenly attacks him with a hidden dagger. Unsol easily blocks the attack, and Cho Ryong is stunned and wonders how he was able to stop him. Unsol tells Cho Ryong that this is all his fault, because of him he was unable to ask his question to the other fighter. Cho Ryong asks in terror when he found out about him. Unsol replies that he knew from the beginning and explains that when they were hiding underground, he realized that Cho Ryong was hiding a set of weapons under his clothes. He adds that it was easy to notice because of the stiff way he was moving his spine. Unsol reveals that the reason he kept him with him despite everything was that he was curious to see what he would do. He thought that observing the way a person tries to deceive others would be useful to him in the future. Cho Ryong refuses to believe it, insisting that his acting was perfect. In a desperate move, he throws all his remaining hidden weapons towards Unsol. Unsol easily dodges Cho Ryong's attack. Cho Ryong thinks to himself that he felt something strange while he was chasing him, and wonders if Unsol can predict his movements. Unsol skillfully dodges all the hidden weapons thrown at him, and then hits Cho Ryong. Unsol tells him that there is no use for the best hidden weapons if they are discovered. Cho Ryong rushes towards Unsol in a final desperate attempt, but Unsol quickly ends the fight and finishes off Cho Ryong. Covered in blood, Unsol thinks that the fight was not easy, and that it would have been dangerous if he had not known in advance about the hidden weapons. He watches the life leave Cho Ryong's body, and notices on his face the same obsession with life that he has seen in every person who dies. Unsol walks away from the scene, and passes by the bodies of the assassins and the fighter who was seeking revenge. He stops at the latter's body, noticing that he is different. This man died with a smile on his face. Unsol wonders about the feeling of successfully achieving revenge, and whether he too will be able to smile like that when he gets his revenge. Unsol takes the dead assassin's swords, and continues on his way. From a distance, one of the killing demons watches Unsol, and wonders if Unsol is the one who did that. Another demon says that Unsol killed the professional assassins using only the basic techniques of the Fire Rain sword sect. He acknowledges that he is definitely talented, but adds that there are many as talented as him here, and that if he doesn't improve, he won't be able to survive on Hell Island. The next day, Unsol finds himself being chased by a group of trainees. One of them was using a metal whip, attacking from a distance. Unsol managed to dodge one of the attacks, but the weapon's trajectory changes in midair and hits him from behind. Unsol realizes that they will not give up, and that he will die at this rate if he doesn't find a way out of this predicament. Meanwhile, at the instructor's camp, the head instructor asks someone for an update. The other tells him that there are still 41 trainees alive out of 86. Head instructor Hyuk Ryun-yong is surprised that so many have survived even after 3 days. He concludes that those who remain must be skilled, and that it is time to truly test their skills. He asks his assistant to give him the map. Elsewhere on the island, one of the trainees is about to kill Unsol after having snatched his sword from his hand. Unsol finds himself on the run again from his pursuers. He thinks that the type of weapons they are using makes fighting in an open area unsuitable for him, so he comes up with a plan that fits his situation. Meanwhile, head instructor Hyuk Ryun-yong looks at the map and decides to restrict the combat zone, and orders the killing demons to be unleashed in the Fire Rain Sword Sect area. Unsol heads straight for the Fire Rain Sword Sect building, and his pursuers follow him inside. The pursuers wonder if he is hiding inside, and one of them mocks him for being cornered. Their leader thinks that no matter how fast he runs, he won't be able to escape them. Suddenly, Unsol attacks them from behind. The leader calls him a fool, thinking it's a naive trick they won't fall for. Unsol engages in a battle with them, skillfully avoiding their weapon attacks. The leader is stunned and wonders how this bastard can read the paths of their sword techniques. Unsol uses the chaos and narrow corridors to his advantage, and fights his pursuers fiercely. One of the pursuers realizes that this crowded place weakens the power of their attacks, and before he can finish his thought, Unsol kills him. The pursuer realizes in his final moments that Unsol had deliberately lured them here. Unsol thinks that his opponents are forced to shorten their attacks in this narrow space, which weakens their power and makes their movements more predictable. In addition, he notices that they are not that skilled. He concludes that he has a chance to defeat them if he fights them one by one. One of the pursuers shouts and attacks, but Unsol dodges him. Another attacks with his whip, but the whip unexpectedly bounces off the wall and hits Unsol, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground. One of the pursuers sees an opportunity and shouts at the others to move now and escape from this place. But before the pursuer can escape, he suddenly stops. Someone has stopped him, who coldly asks them what they are doing and if they are running away. Unsol watches the scene from a distance. After the fighter has finished off the rest of the pursuers, he turns to Unsol and asks him if he is their leader. The fighter praises Unsol's skill, and then asks him if the sword technique he used earlier was the Fire Rain sword. The killer introduces himself as Wu Moonqiang and asks Unsol for his name. In a previous scene, Moonqiang was shouting at his subordinates, asking them if they were running away. One of them hesitantly replies that they didn't think it was a good idea to fight in that place. Moonqiang is angered by their cowardice and kills them all in the blink of an eye. He thinks to himself with contempt that this is why he hates working with losers who haven't even reached the advanced hall. Back in the present, just as Unsol is about to answer, Moonqiang laughs out loud, saying that he doesn't care about the name of someone who is about to die. Moonqiang attacks Unsol fiercely. Unsol tries to block the attack, but the whip wraps around his sword, and then he breaks his sword with ease. Moon Chong mocks him, saying that he heard that the advanced hall of the Fire Rain sword sect only taught him one defensive technique. Unsol is surprised, and wonders how his opponent knows about the shining mysticism, and whether he has an information network that he knows nothing about. Moon Chong attacks him again, scolding him for getting lost in thought in the middle of a fight. The fight between them intensifies, and Unsol realizes that his opponent is destroying everything in his path, and that there is no advantage in fighting someone like him in an enclosed space. Unsol moves away to create some distance between them. Moon Chong expresses his disappointment and tells Unsol that with skills like these, he is no match for him. Moon Chong unleashes an all-out attack with his chain weapon, trapping Unsol in a web from all directions. He sarcastically asks him if this is his last struggle, believing that a defensive technique like the shining mysticism will not save him. But he is stunned when he sees that Unsol is still standing. Then Unsol managed to break free from the web that Moon Chong had woven with his weapon. Moon Chong laughs and vows to kill him soon. Unsol analyzes the situation and realizes that he can block the attacks using the shining mysticism, but he cannot generate enough power to stop them completely. At that moment, he remembers his training and realizes what he needs now: destructive power capable of penetrating steel. Unsol focuses his energy and then unleashes a massive attack that completely surprises Moon Chong and shatters his defense, leaving him in a state of shock. Unsol stands panting after the battle as he remembers how he countered Moon Chong's attack with a massive explosion of energy, unleashing the technique of unparalleled lightning and thunder, a devastating technique that completely annihilates his opponent. Unsol thinks that this technique indeed possesses immense power, as the instructor said, but he coughs up blood, realizing that it is too advanced for his current level and that he cannot use it freely. He is relieved that he won, but he sees that the battle took too long and that the restricted zones will soon change, so he must move. Suddenly he senses the presence of someone else and wonders why he is in this place, and he freezes in place when he sees a killing demon standing in front of him. Unsol wonders why a killing demon is here and whether this area has become restricted during his fight. He concludes that he didn't end up here because he ran away from a fight and wonders if he will be allowed to leave peacefully. He sees that the demon is not responding, so he assumes that he can leave. As Unsol tries to pass by him, the demon suddenly attacks him with a swift move from behind. Unsol imagines that his neck will be cut if he fails to dodge it. Unsol dodges the attack at the last second and realizes that if it weren't for the wandering beast path, he would have surely died, as he couldn't even sense his opponent's presence as he swung his sword. Unsol prepares for the confrontation and thinks that he should not be deceived by his opponent's calmness, and that if he tries to move, the demon will attack him immediately. Unsol remembers a lesson he learned from Sa Wu, which is that when a predator hunts a prey, the prey is not easily caught even though the predator is faster. And the reason for this is that the prey moves in a zigzag path, but apex predators always succeed in their hunt because they attack the moment their prey moves. Unsol wonders how he should face such an opponent and remembers the rest of the lesson. If the predator attacks based on timing, then the solution is to make his movements completely unpredictable. Unsol decides to apply this strategy. He starts by moving in a predictable zigzag path, then uses the wandering beast path to dodge the expected attacks. And finally, he seizes the right moment and creates an opening in his opponent's defense with a completely unexpected move. Unsol finds himself in a state of shock. The killing demon stands before him for a moment, and Unsol thinks that it's too late and he's doomed, but he is surprised when he sees the demon stop attacking and turn to leave. Unsol wonders why he stopped and whether he had crossed the boundary of the restricted area without realizing it. He thinks about the fight and realizes that he barely managed to dodge the attacks with all his might, yet he couldn't create a single opening in his opponent's defense. He admits to himself that this is the level of a true master, and that he was like a frog in a well, not realizing how vast the world is and how powerful those in it are. He comes to the conclusion that the killing demon's martial arts were on a level he couldn't even measure, and that his grandfather's killer undoubtedly possesses comparable skills. His resolve hardens that he must surpass this level of mastery if he wants to achieve his revenge. Suddenly, another person appears before him and calls him by his full name, Unsol of the Bo family. This person tells him that he has been looking for him for a while, and that he has heard that he learned the wandering beast path. Unsol thinks that this man is talking as if he knows him, just like the others, which means that information about him has spread. The man begins to introduce himself and then stops, saying sarcastically that someone who is about to die does not need to know his name, and then launches a surprise attack. Unsol easily avoids the attack. The attacker is impressed by Unsol's ability, noting that he predicted the path of his attack with his beast-like senses. He tells him that he is sure that he will become one of the 10 demon lords in the future, and for that specific reason he must kill him now while he is still a demon seed. Unsol notices that his opponent's energy flow has completely changed. He remembers that not everyone on the island is seeking to become one of the 10 demon lords, and wonders if this man is one of them. He forces himself to get rid of distracting thoughts to focus on the fight. During the exchange of blows, Unsol feels a strange sensation, a strange energy flow that is pulling him towards him. Unsol remembers a lesson with his grandfather, where he explained that one of the bodies they examined was killed by the 5 cutting tiger blades of the Hyebi Feng clan. His grandfather knew this because although there were no external wounds, all of the victim's bones were shattered, which is the hallmark of this technique that works by flowing qi into the opponent's body with each clash. In the present, Unsol shouts, realizing that the technique he is facing is the 5 cutting tiger blades of the Hyebi Feng clan. His opponent is stunned that he was able to recognize his style. Unsol remembers another characteristic of this technique that his grandfather explained, the powerful absorption technique, which acts like a vortex that pulls everything towards it, and they use it to control the opponent's weapon with each clash. Unsol continues to remember his grandfather's lesson, who explained that the Hyebi Feng clan fights just like a tiger, exploiting the opportunity of confusing the opponent's sword to swallow it whole. The young Unsol asks his grandfather if this clan is the strongest, and the grandfather replies that the absorption technique is a double-edged sword. Although it is deceptive, it forces its user to get close to his opponent. In the present, Unsol decides to exploit this absorption technique to twist his opponent's sword towards himself. His opponent, Feng Ak of the Hyebi Feng clan, declares that he will now face him with all seriousness, and vows in the name of his clan that he will eradicate this demon seed. When Feng Ak attacks, Unsol surprises him by planting his sword in the ground, and Feng Ak is shocked by this unexpected move. Unsol uses the sword as a pivot point to kick Feng Ak and make him lose his balance, and he realizes to himself that his plan is working. Feng Ak gets angry and accuses Unsol of resorting to dirty tricks. Unsol thinks that the trick worked, but it didn't cause much damage, which makes sense because his opponent has been training for a long time. But now he knows how to counter him. Unsol remembers another lesson from his master. Wait until the opponent attacks first, for true speed lies in being a fraction of a second faster than him at the moment of engagement. Unsol decides that he will use the energy absorption technique against him to become faster. Feng Ak attacks again, but Unsol decides not to resist the pulling force. On the contrary, he flows with it, using the momentum to accelerate his sword. Then at the last moment, he changes the direction of his attack and lands a successful blow on Feng Ak. Feng Ak is shocked, wondering if Unsol has turned the energy absorption technique to his advantage. He sees this as impossible, as his technique is strong enough to pull a rock from a distance, and even the most skilled swordsmen find it difficult to accurately exploit such a force. He dismisses the idea that a young man like Unsol could do that, and attacks him again in the same way. Unsol thinks that there is no point in that, as the stronger the absorption, the faster his sword becomes. Feng Ak shouts in frustration, wondering how long Unsol thinks this tactic will work. Suddenly, Unsol notices that his opponent is no longer using the energy absorption technique. Feng Ak tells him that he doesn't need to use it to defeat someone like him. Feng Ak rushes forward in a direct attack, while Unsol thinks that this is the moment he has been waiting for. Unsol prepares and uses the first technique of the Fire Rain sword, the Shining Mysticism. He unleashes a powerful counterattack, exploiting the moment his opponent has abandoned his defense, and delivers a finishing blow to Feng Ak. Feng Ak falls to his knees and asks in shock if that was the Shining Mysticism technique, and Unsol confirms it, and that it was a dangerous move. Unsol thinks that in order to turn the only deadly move in the defensive Shining Mysticism technique into a full-fledged attack, he had to deliberately direct all of his opponent's other attacks towards himself. Feng Ak expresses his astonishment, saying that he would have never imagined interpreting the technique in that way. He then asks Unsol if he is simply going to leave. Unsol replies that he is not part of his revenge. Feng Ak finds it interesting, wondering about the existence of someone like Unsol in the demonic sex. Unsol tells him that he hopes they will not see each other again, and then leaves. Feng Ak collapses from his injuries, and suddenly another person appears behind him, and Feng Ak asks him if he is here to kill him. A masked killing demon addresses Feng Ak, noting that he was very useful for someone from the orthodox sex, and that his death is unfortunate. Feng Ak realizes that they knew he was a spy from the beginning, and the demon tells him that he underestimates the Devil's Palace. He then says goodbye and kills him. Elsewhere on the island, one of the trainees was running at full speed to save his life. We see Seo Jin-ha pulling out the weapons embedded in her body one by one. Then she stands, panting and injured. A group of opponents appears before her, and their leader tells her that she has been unlucky. He mocks her, asking if she really thinks she can escape after being poisoned with the special Hellish Blood Fortress poison, and describes her as doomed unless she has an antidote. Jinha curses her luck and thinks that she did not know that there was such an organized group using hidden weapons and poisons, and that there are limits to what she can do alone. The opponents notice that Jinha is holding her sword in her left hand and ask her if she is going to fight them with it. The leader tells her that even if she is talented, a right-handed swordsman cannot suddenly become proficient with her left hand, and advises her to surrender. They then begin to attack her together. But Jinha fends them off with surprising skill, but she is injured in the arm. She realizes that another poisoned needle has hit her, and that if she does not get an antidote within 15 minutes, it will be over for her. Surrounded and injured, she begins to think about surrendering. Suddenly, Jinha hears a scream, as her attackers are ambushed by an unknown person who finishes them off one by one, while they scream, asking who is attacking them. At the last moment, Unsol intervenes, and saves Seo Jinha from the ambush. With swift and decisive movements, Unsol eliminates all the attackers, leaving their bodies scattered on the ground. Unsol stands in the middle of the massacre, and Jinha cautiously steps back and asks him to wait, assuring him that she has no ill intentions towards him. She searches the body of one of the attackers and finds a vial, and realizes that it is the antidote. She thinks that with this antidote, she will be able to face the rest of the members of the hellish blood fortress more easily. As Unsol turns to leave, Jinha asks him to wait again, and he asks her what she wants. She tells him that she has been poisoned and has only 10 minutes before the poison spreads through her body. Unsol replies coldly that she is mistaken and explains that he came here to kill everyone, including her. He adds that the only reason he is letting her go is that he doesn't feel the need to kill her himself. Jinha admits that she will die if he leaves her, and that in the end she is just another competitor to him. In a desperate attempt, she offers to work with him if he gives her the antidote. Unsol asks her why he would do that. Jinha explains that there are only 20 people left, and that everyone except them belongs to groups. She says that no matter how strong he is, he will not be able to face them all alone. She adds that if she works with him, she can provide him with information about their martial arts, and she vows that she will never betray him if he saves her life. Unsol considers her offer. Based on what he has seen of her so far, he concludes that despite her pride and independent behavior, she does not seem to be the type to resort to deception or betrayal. He asks about the terms of the agreement, and she suggests that they work together until only the two of them are left, and they vow not to betray each other. After a moment of thought, Unsol throws the antidote to her, and she thanks him. Suddenly, Unsol hears a strange sound and wonders if another restricted area has been created. He tells Jinha that they have to leave, and she replies that she doesn't think this area is restricted. Unsol urges her to think, explaining that most parts of the island have already become restricted, and the appearance of a new restricted area now most likely means that the rest of the contestants will be heading here. Indeed, other groups of trainees begin to appear, and they started to surround them, and Unsol realizes that it is too late to escape. One of the newcomers catches Unsol's attention, and he feels that this man is different from the others. One of the trainees suggests that everyone agree to kill Unsol and Jinha first. Another identifies them, Bo Unsol, who learned the Wandering Beast path, and Seo Jinha, who should not be underestimated for her skills in the sword and her investigations into the other trainees. The leader of the opposing group thinks that they now know about Unsol and Seo Jinha, and that he was wondering why they hadn't formed a team, and he guesses that they are working together now. Unsol remembers the vial of antidote powder that she got, and she tells Unsol that she will use the poison of the hellish blood fortress, and that this will give them a chance. Jinha throws the powder into the air, and the opponents panic, believing it to be the poison of the hellish blood fortress. Unsol and Jinha use this opportunity to escape. One of the opponents realizes that the powder is not poisonous and that they have been deceived, and the leader orders them to pursue them. Jinha thinks that the powder creates a thick smoke, which makes it good for deceiving the eyes. Jinha thinks that the open area is not in their favor, and that they should head to the rock formations where there are many small caves. Unsol asks her if she is thinking the same thing he is, and she replies that they need to find a cave to fight in, and Unsol tells her that he knows one. He leads her to a cave with a narrow entrance and a long passage. Jinha is amazed that he had planned all of this, and finds it hard to believe that he has just learned the Wandering Beast path, and she wonders about his true identity. They set off at full speed towards the rocky area, and when they arrive, Jinha notices a strange fog that wasn't there before, and Unsol agrees with her that there is something strange. A killing demon appears from among the fog. Jinha realizes in shock that they are the killing demons, and that this is a restricted area. Unsol calmly observes that the demons are just watching the situation, and he concludes that the instructors deliberately chose this place as a restricted area because they were heading towards it. Jinha asks what they should do, and Unsol replies that as long as they do not cross the border, the demons will not attack them. Unsol adds that if they have to fight, this is not the worst place to do it. If they stand with their backs to the restricted area, it will be no different than fighting in a cave with their backs to the wall. Jinha agrees with him, saying that they have no other choice, and they prepare to fight. At that moment, the group that was chasing them arrives, and their leader asks them sarcastically if they are done running. The two teams stand facing each other, while the killing demons watch from behind. One of the trainees complains that Unsol and Jinha are causing them a lot of trouble, and decides not to waste any more time, and orders the others to attack them at once. With a booming voice that cuts through the silence, head instructor Hyuk Ryun Young announces that the decisive moment has arrived, and this is the final battle that will determine the sole champion of the Devil's Palace. As his words end, as if it were the starting signal, the attackers surge forward like a raging torrent in a single wave towards Unsol and Jinha, determined to crush them under the weight of their numbers. Immediately, a fierce and chaotic battle begins, where swords clash and screams fly. In the midst of this clash, one of the attackers spots a fleeting opportunity and throws a set of poisoned hidden weapons towards Unsol, but thanks to his alert senses, he manages to dodge them at the last moment, letting them zip past him and embed themselves in the ground. Unsol and Jinha fight with a ferocity and courage like no other. In particular, Jinha was moving with an incredible lightness and agility among the enemies, like a deadly butterfly dancing among the flames, taking them down with her precise sword strikes one after another. In a moment of distraction, one of the powerful attackers suddenly appears from among the crowd and directs a treacherous and powerful attack towards her, trying to exploit the situation. Jinha manages to spot the attack at the last second and successfully blocks it with her sword, but the immense force of the shock pushes her back a few steps, causing her arm to tremble. After quickly regaining her balance, Unsol and Jinha stand back to back, forming an impenetrable fortress against the vast numbers of opponents who are tightening the noose around them. In the midst of the overwhelming chaos and continuous fighting, and with the increasing number of attackers, Jinha suffers a deep wound in her shoulder, and she wonders in despair as the blood flows from her body, whether this is her inevitable end here. She thinks that she has fought with all her strength and spared no effort, and therefore she feels no regret for her path, but the idea of death still makes her hesitate to continue fighting with the same determination. Unsol immediately senses the despair that has crept into her, and the idea of no regrets that she was thinking about echoes in his mind. His memory at that moment conjures up the image of his grandfather's gentle, warm hand patting his head. Then the image suddenly transforms into his disfigured and bloody face as he breathed his last in his arms. Unsol's determination ignites anew like an erupting volcano, and he vows to himself in a voice that resonates in his depths that he will never allow himself to die in a place like this, not before he achieves his revenge. Driven by this blazing determination, Unsol returns to the heart of the battle with a renewed strength that surpasses what he had moments before, tearing through the enemy ranks with a series of swift and mercilessly deadly blows, transforming into a whirlwind of steel and death. He then rushes at lightning speed towards the remaining attackers who have not yet realized what has happened. One of the opponents curses him as he witnesses his unstoppable brutality, screaming that he is a demon and not a human, while the others wonder in terror as they see their comrades fall, about the type of terrifying sword art he is using. The group's leader quickly realizes that Unsol is the greatest threat to their entire plan, and he shouts at the top of his lungs, ordering his men to ignore everything else and focus on him and take him down first at any cost. In that crucial moment, as all eyes and swords turn towards him, Unsol remembers his master Sawu's teachings to trust his combat instincts and move as his senses guide him without thinking. And in that moment of clarity, he realizes that he has already grasped the essence of his master's sword art. With complete confidence, Unsol unleashes Sawu's practical martial arts, moving like a ghost among his opponents who are no longer able to track his movements, and finishes them off with deadly skill and precision, leaving behind only the screams of pain and the fallen bodies that paint a tragic picture on the battlefield. As Unsol was taking a breath to think about the effectiveness of the martial arts he learned from Sawu, the leader of the attackers suddenly attacked him from a blind spot and delivered a devastating punch, taking advantage of his moment of distraction. Unsol notices the imminent danger from this surprise punch, and with an involuntary movement, he manages to block it with his sword at the last split second. Unsol finally faces the group leader face to face, who tells him coldly that his time is up, and this is his end. The punch was incredibly powerful, so much so that Unsol's sword, which had withstood all the blows, began to crack like fragile glass before it. From the force of the violent attack, Unsol flies into the air and falls far away, hitting the ground hard. Jinha screams his name from her place in the battle as she sees him fall, and one of the attackers tells her with cold gloating that it is too late and that man, Unsol, is already dead after receiving that blow. Jinha shouts with all her might at Unsol to get up and be careful where he is, realizing that the real danger has only just begun. With a voice filled with panic, Jinha warns Unsol that he is standing directly in a forbidden zone, a place where no one should be. As Unsol collapses on the ground, severely injured and unable to move, the masked killing demon advances towards him with slow, steady steps, like a grim reaper coming to claim his victim. Unsol looks up and sees the killing demon slowly extending his hand towards him to finish him off with a final blow. Suddenly, head instructor Hyuk Ryu Nyong shouts at the top of his voice, issuing a thunderous order for everyone to stop fighting immediately. Upon hearing the order, the killing demon's hand stops just a few inches from Unsol's face. In that last breathtaking moment, Master Sa Wu appears like a phantom out of nowhere and places his cold sword on the killing demon's neck, saving his disciple from certain death. The shocked Unsol looks up and can barely whisper the name of his rescuing master, Sa Wu. He then sinks into the darkness of unconsciousness and faints from the extreme exhaustion and pain, after finally feeling safe and realizing that this horrific test was over. At top speed, head instructor Hyuk Ryu Nyong runs towards them and shouts at his men in anger and concern to hurry and bring the mad doctor immediately before the boy dies, and this rare talent is lost. One of his assistants protests the instructor's sudden decision to cancel the third stage of the test in this unprecedented manner, but the head instructor firmly declares that he will take full responsibility for his decision before everyone. The instructor thinks to himself with overwhelming joy that he has finally found the person he has been searching for so long, a unique individual with extraordinary reflexes, a pure killing intent, and a mind that does not waver even in the darkest of circumstances. As the unconscious Unsol is carried away, the instructor sees him as an uncut, unpolished gem, a rare and perfectly balanced talent worthy of becoming one of the 10 true demon disciples who will lead the next generation. Later, in one of the halls of the Devil's Palace, Hua Wei Myung, one of the prominent elders of the Devil's Palace, questions the head instructor about his reckless decision. The assistant reminds him that the original plan, which was drawn up according to the will of the master of the Byong Wing, was to select only 12 finalists, 10 to join the 10 demonic sects, and 2 others to serve as their eyes and ears in the shadows. Elder Wei Myung sharply rebukes the instructor, warning him that he will be severely punished for ending the test with 2 extra people, but the instructor replies confidently that he is fully prepared for that and will not regret his decision. The elder sighs, expressing his deep concern about the reaction of the envoys of the 10 demonic sects who will soon arrive to choose their disciples. But the instructor reassures him with unwavering confidence, claiming that none of them at all has a better expert eye than him for discovering true talent. Unsol slowly awakens to find himself in a comfortable bed inside an unfamiliar room he has never seen before, and he wonders in confusion where he is and how he got here. From the strong smell of medicinal herbs that fills the air, he deduces that he is in a medical wing or a place dedicated to treating the wounded. He carefully inspects his body to discover that all his wounds have been completely and miraculously healed, not just the visible external injuries, but even the deep internal damage he sustained from the overuse of advanced sword arts that exceeded his current body's capacity. Unsol is amazed by the skill of the Devil's Palace doctor, which surpassed all his expectations and seems like a miracle. Unsol cautiously gets out of bed and opens the door to find himself in a long, quiet corridor. A servant who was waiting for him greets him, respectfully addressing him as young master, and then politely asks him to follow him. The servant leads him through a large and luxurious hall where the rest of the survivors of the bloody test are sitting. Unsol looks out of a huge round window overlooking a panoramic view and asks about this place, and the servant informs him that they are in the central building of Hell Island. Unsol realizes that this is the only place he was unable to explore on the island, which was shrouded in mystery. Another servant kindly asks him if he would like to order any food, assuring him that he can prepare anything his heart desires after all he has been through. After a moment of thought, Unsol orders only 2 bowls of noodles, a simple food that reminds him of his past. A few moments later, the hot food is served to him, and as soon as he sees it, he immediately remembers his happy and warm memories with his grandfather, when they used to sit together and eat noodles happily. As he was lost in his memories, he finds Seo Jinha sitting in front of him at the same table, looking at him silently. Unsol asks her in surprise why she is sitting with him without an invitation. After a short silence, Jinha breaks the barrier and thanks Unsol for saving her in the battle. She explains that without him and his intervention in the final battle, she would now be just a lost soul in the underworld, as she was on the verge of death. Unsol seems confused by her sudden thanks, and simply replies that all he did was eliminate the enemies who were standing in his way. Jinha explains the matter to him further, saying that only 12 people were supposed to remain after the end of the third stage, according to the strict rules. But in order to save him from death at the hands of the killing demon, the instructor suddenly stopped the test, allowing 14 people to survive and stay alive. She tells him that from her point of view, he is the direct reason she is still alive, and for that specific reason she wanted to thank him face to face, admitting that saying such emotional words is not in her nature at all. Then Jinha adds another piece of information, telling him that 4 full days have passed since he lost consciousness after the battle. Unsol is shocked, as he had thought that only 1 day had passed since those bloody events. Jinha tells him that he was very lucky that the mad doctor happened to be on the island at that time. She then tells him the story of this legendary doctor, who was nicknamed the Divine Hand, and was considered the greatest doctor in the entire world, but he went mad and lost his mind after he failed to cure the only woman he loved of a terminal illness. However, it is rumored that despite his madness, he can still save anyone from any injury, no matter how serious, as long as they are still breathing, even if it is just 1 breath. Unsol realizes that this legendary doctor is the one who treated him and brought him back from the brink of death, and he closes his eyes in pain, wishing that his grandfather had had the chance to meet him before he died. Jinha decides to tell him some additional important information as a final service to a former comrade in arms. She reveals a dangerous secret to him, which is that the killing demons they fought in the test were not just ordinary guards, but were in fact real and experienced masters, as they were specially sent from the 10 demonic sects to test them. Unsol now understands why their martial arts were at such a high and terrifying level. He then asks Jinha if she knows the real reason behind the head instructor saving him. Jinha replies that this is the same question that has been puzzling her and that she wanted to ask him about, pointing out that the instructor seemed strangely determined to make him one of the 10 demon disciples. She asks him curiously if his clan is connected to the instructor in some way, or if they had met before, but Unsol flatly denies any relationship or prior acquaintance between them at all. Jinha's confusion deepens, and she tells him that the head instructor was severely punished for breaking the rules for his sake, and was forced to step down from his position and return immediately to the Devil's Palace. Unsol stands unable to understand the situation at all, wondering to himself why a complete stranger would risk his future and position to save him, knowing full well that he would be punished for it. Suddenly, a loud bell rings throughout the place, interrupting their conversation. Jinha tells him that the time has come, and that this is the agreed-upon signal for everyone who is still alive on Hell Island to gather. She deduces from this that it can only mean one thing, which is that the leaders and envoys of the 10 demonic sects have finally arrived to choose their disciples. The 14 survivors gather in a large hall in the center of Hell Island. Bo Unsol stands among them, noticing the eerie silence that pervades the place. He thinks that it is amazing that this large number of leaders are moving without making a single footstep sound. While he was lost in his confusion, one of the leaders turned towards the group of survivors, examining their faces carefully, then raised his hand, pointing his finger at one of them, and said in a firm voice, "You there." The man introduces himself as Bulsa, the deputy leader of the Death Spirit sect, and directs his question to one of the trainees, Yong Munho, asking him to step forward. He repeats his question whether Munho will become the successor of the Death Spirit sect. Yong Munho looks confused, protesting that he has only trained in saber arts all his life, and that he has never touched a spear. Bulsa tells him that it doesn't matter, and explains that he was born with the perfect conditions to master the Death Spirit spear. He adds that despite his excellent physique, his body and talent are suited for the spear, but he chose the saber, which is why he could never reach true greatness. He asks him to follow him if he has understood, and Munho reluctantly agrees and follows him. After that, another leader, an old man with a white beard and a large distinctive hat, swallows and thinks that his turn has come. This man introduces himself as Jok Yahun, the revered teacher of 10,000 poisons and deputy master of the hellish blood star. The rest of the trainees feel nervous, remembering his fearsome reputation as a master of poison arts capable of killing every living being in his vicinity with a single gesture. Jok Yahun points and calls out, "Seo Jinha." He extends his hand towards her and asks if she will become the successor of the hellish blood star. Jinha is shocked and her eyes widen, thinking that all her life she has been known as a sword prodigy, as shown in a memory of her defeating her peers with a wooden sword, and now he is asking her to join the sect that creates poison humans. Jok Yahun addresses her, saying that the most terrifying poison in the world is a poisoned heart. He then reveals that he knows what she did. Before the third stage began, she used a girl in the main castle's martial arts hall to try to kill all the trainees. And when the plan failed, she killed the girl immediately to cover her tracks. Jinha shouts in her defense, claiming that the girl was the one who suggested it and who tried to kill her first, and that accusing her of covering her tracks is a huge leap in logic. Jok Yahun interrupts her to tell her that he doesn't blame her. On the contrary, he sees that the will to kill countless souls without hesitation to achieve a goal is a perfect trait for their poison arts and is even admirable. He explains to her that she may think she is talented with the sword, but her level will never allow her to dominate the martial arts world. He adds that only the chosen ones can subdue the Murim with a sword, and assures her that she has a talent for poisons far superior to her talent for the sword. The word chosen ones echoes in the silent Jinha's mind. She glances secretly at Unsol standing among the trainees, remembering that he claimed he only started learning the sword after coming to the 10 demon disciples test. Despite that, as she saw for herself in the previous battles, his skill already rivaled what took her 10 years to achieve. Realizing who the true chosen one with the sword is, she makes her decision. She steps forward and announces that in that case, she will accept joining the Hellish Blood Star. Jokya-hoon smiles and asks Seojin-ha to follow him. After they leave, another leader wearing a red robe steps forward, announcing that his sect's turn has come. He introduces himself as Wi Hyuk-gon of the Hwawu Sword Sect, and his reputation spreads among the trainees. Those present recognize him as the Sword Demon, the disciple of the former leader of the Hwawu sect and currently ranked number 1 in the demonic path. Anticipation fills the trainees, one wondering who he will choose, while another hopes to be chosen. Wi Hyuk-gon points towards Bo Un-sol and calls his name. Hyuk-gon addresses him, saying he heard that instructor Jin and even elder Dan sing his praises. He adds inquiringly that furthermore, Un-sol inherited the ultimate art of instructor Chun. Un-sol confirms this to be true. Wi Hyuk-gon expresses his high hopes for his future achievements and tells him that the depths of his sect's sword arts are unfathomable and that he must train hard. As he turns to leave, a look of hesitation flashes in Un-sol's eyes as he remembers his master, Sa-woo. He suddenly raises his voice, announcing that he will not go to the Hwawu sword sect. Wi Hyuk-gon stops, shocked, and asks him what he just said. A violent red aura erupts from him, and he asks angrily if Un-sol dares to refuse the position of his sect's successor. Un-sol staggers under the immense pressure and answers with difficulty that he heard that they could refuse the offers. Wi Hyuk-gon asks him with a cold gaze where he wishes to join after refusing his sect. Un-sol answers that he will go to the Nangya Pavilion. His shock increases, and he repeats the name Nangya Pavilion with disdain. He shouts at Un-sol in a rage, his red aura intensifying, wondering how he could choose the dilapidated Nangya Pavilion of all places, and accusing him of trying to insult his sect. Un-sol feels the pressure almost crushing his body, and realizes that this is the power of the number 1 sword demon of the demonic path. At that moment, someone suddenly steps forward to stand in front of him, blocking Wi Hyuk-gon's aura. His anger intensifies, and he shouts, wondering how a mere secret hall master dares to block his path. The man, who is Master Sa-woo, slowly places his hand on his sword. The other trainees watch in horror, wondering if this man is crazy to try to draw his sword against the sword demon. Un-sol recognizes his master, whispering the name Elder Sa. Wi Hyuk-gon scoffs at Sa-woo, asking if he thinks he can overstep his bounds with him just because he is friends with instructor Jin. One of the elders watches the situation with concern, thinking that if a fight breaks out here, the other candidates might die in the crossfire. As the confrontation reaches its peak and Sa-woo moves, a new voice intervenes. Another leader smiles and speaks calmly, pointing out that everyone is feeling truly uncomfortable. The blonde-haired leader, wearing a green robe, places his hand on Wi Hyuk-gon's sword and asks them to stop there. Wi Hyuk-gon glares at the interloper, who introduces himself as Dan Chung, the deputy master of the Nangya Pavilion. Dan Chung asks Hyuk-gon to let it go this time for his sake. The other elders reluctantly agree, and one adds with a laugh that they had to choose one person for the Nangya Pavilion anyway. Hyuk-gon glares sharply at Un-sol and Master Sa-woo, making them feel tense. Before they leave, he gives a final warning to Dan Chung, telling him to take Un-sol and leave quickly before his sword is drawn on its own. Dan Chung bows, thanking him for his understanding, then smiles and asks Un-sol and Sa-woo to leave with him. As Un-sol walks away, he thinks about the aura he just felt. It was filled with a strong killing intent directed straight at him. He realizes that if it weren't for Dan Chung and Sa-woo's intervention, Wi Hyuk-gon would have killed him. The three of them leave together, and Master Sa-woo addresses Un-sol, praising how much his skills have improved since he last saw him. Un-sol laughs, replying that it's all thanks to him teaching him the beast path. Dan Chung pats his head, expressing his surprise at him choosing the Nangya Pavilion, but calls him a good kid. Un-sol replies that he felt the path of the Nangya Pavilion suited him in many ways. After a while, Dan Chung announces that they have arrived, and reveals the Nangya Pavilion. Un-sol is shocked by the scene. Instead of the quiet and solemn place he expected, he finds a bustling market crowded with people. Dan Chung asks him if he's surprised, and explains that unlike other sects that control local markets, their pavilion adheres to self-sufficiency. Un-sol notices that everyone around him looks elderly, so he asks Dan Chung if there are any other disciples his age in the pavilion. Dan Chung smiles awkwardly, explaining that in the past, many young disciples came after hearing the legends of the Nangya Pavilion, but most of them either died during training or ran away. Un-sol understands the situation while Dan Chung points to a spot, saying it looks good. He tells him that this will be his residence from now on, and adds that if he needs anything repaired, he can talk to Master Gol, the blacksmith Wang Gol, and get any tools he needs from him. Dan Chung and Sa Wu prepare to leave. Dan Chung calls out to Sa Wu that he's leaving. Sa Wu bids farewell to Unsol, telling him to continue his training. Unsol asks him worriedly if he won't be staying here. Dan Chung explains that Sa Wu is the master of the secret hall, and that even if his intervention was to protect him, he doesn't have the authority or power to confront the sword demon that way, and he must pay the price for his actions. Unsol asks what pay the price means, and if that's why he's leaving. So Wu reassures him not to worry too much, explaining that it's just a light disciplinary action, and he won't be gone for long. He then hits him on the back, warning him jokingly not to even think about slacking off just because he's not around, and assures him he will check on him constantly to see how things are going. Unsol watches his master leave and tells him to take care of himself. After he leaves, Dan Chung turns to Unsol and calls him by his full name, Bo Unsol, telling him that he cannot be considered a disciple of the Nangya Pavilion yet. Unsol looks confused. Dan Chung explains that although he has become one of the 10 demon disciples, it doesn't mean he is an official disciple of the Nangya Pavilion. With a serious look, he tells him that the weak cannot become disciples in their pavilion. Unsol wonders if this means that if he becomes stronger, he can immediately become a disciple without any further procedures. Dan Chung laughs, confirming it, and explains that they don't care for useless formalities. He adds that every disciple in this pavilion is the pavilion itself, so there's no need to impose an oath or a sense of belonging. He tells him not to worry about anything else, and to just focus on mastering his martial arts to become stronger. He must become strong enough to be recognized as a disciple of the Nangya Pavilion. Dan Chung tells him that everyone here is his teacher, which surprises Unsol, but Dan Chung adds with a sly smile that it's up to the teachers to decide whether they will teach him or not. The next day, Unsol heads to Cheoljiang Peak. He was climbing the mountain, panting from exhaustion. Thinking that there was only a little left to reach the summit, he remembers Dan Chung's instructions, who had asked him the previous day to go up to the summit, and told him that a master who would teach him the ultimate internal energy cultivation method was there. When Unsol reaches the summit, a huge bald man covered in scars greets him. He asks him if he is the one chosen to be a disciple of the Nangya Pavilion. Unsol confirms it. The master says he was informed by Deputy Master Dan that he came here to learn the internal energy cultivation method, but he asks him in confusion, pointing out that Unsol has already mastered some technique and wonders why he is seeking more, being dissatisfied. Unsol looks completely baffled. The master shouts in his face, asking if he doesn't feel the true energy flowing from his body, which seems to have been systematically built since childhood. Unsol replies in confusion that he has lived his entire life as an undertaker and that he has never learned any internal energy cultivation method. The master steps towards him, telling him it's one of two possibilities. Either he is the biggest liar in the world, or he mastered it in his sleep. Unsol insists he is not lying, and asks the master to check for himself. He asks him if he would mind, in that case, if he were to destroy all that internal energy. Unsol, despite his obvious nervousness, replies that of course he doesn't mind. The master grabs his arm to check his energy, but is greatly surprised. He discovers that the boy's body is full of true energy, but there is no circulation of it at all. He realizes this means Unsol has only been blindly accumulating energy in his lower dantian without ever circulating it, and thinks this shouldn't be possible. As Unsol groans in pain, the master grabs him angrily and shouts, asking the identity of who did this. He continues to shout, wondering who taught him to throw true energy into his body like this. Unsol asks the master in confusion what he means by how to build true energy. The latter replies by asking him if he ever learned a technique to calm his mind, or a specific way of breathing. Unsol answers that if it's about a way of breathing, there is one his grandfather taught him. The master orders him to perform it. Unsol takes a deep breath and begins to apply the method his grandfather taught him. The master is shocked as he watches, thinking that he is circulating his energy while standing. He realizes this means Unsol can circulate energy in any posture, and notes how remarkable this breathing method is. Unsol continues to breathe, and the master orders him to stop. He asks him if his grandfather taught him this breathing method, and Unsol confirms it. He explains that when he used to play the corpse game with his grandfather, the latter told him this was a way to breathe more easily inside a coffin. The master tells him that this is not just a breathing technique, but a way to gather true energy in the lower dantian and build immense internal energy, and it's called the energy flow and breath control method. He explains that this is different from an internal energy cultivation technique, which allows a person to freely use the energy they cultivate in their body. He reveals to Unsol that he already has in his dantian enough accumulated internal energy that would take a martial artist more than 10 years to achieve. Unsol looks in shock at the glowing energy in his lower abdomen. With a serious look, the master asks Unsol for his grandfather's name. The latter replies hesitantly that his family name was Bo, and his given name was Ganyang. The master repeats the name in deep thought, Bo Ganyang. He tells him that as far as he knows, as a humble monk, there is only one man in the Murim who used the name Bo Ganyang. He recalls a majestic image of a man, and reveals that he was the former deputy master of the demonic palace, known as the first blade of the demonic path, the seven-branched demonic blade, Bo Ganyang. Unsol is completely shocked, and thinks of his grandfather. He remembers his cheerful face, and wonders in disbelief if his grandfather was really the deputy master of the demonic palace. But he quickly shakes his head, dismissing the idea, and wonders why the deputy master of the demonic palace would work as an undertaker, cleaning the bodies of those who died far from home. Master Hyol Geumgang interrupts him, saying that regardless of his grandfather's identity, the breathing method Unsol learned is actually a secret art from the Shaolin sect. His shock deepens, and he wonders in astonishment when he hears him talk about Shaolin from the Orthodox faction, and thinks whether his grandfather was actually an expert from the Orthodox faction. Panic seizes him, and he thinks about what will happen if the demonic palace finds out about this. He realizes he will suddenly go from being one of the 10 demon disciples to someone not even sure if he'll be allowed to live. Master Hyol Gumgang reassures him with a smile, saying he doesn't doubt him. He explains that with the demonic palace's information network, they would have already finished investigating his background. He adds that they probably didn't know about the breathing method he learned, of course. He confirms that he is only here to teach him the cultivation technique, fulfilling his promise to the Nangya Pavilion, and he tells him that he has no interest in whether Unsol learned internal energy from the Orthodox faction or the demonic path. However, he warns him in a stern tone that if he teaches this technique he will give him to anyone else, or even reveals a single letter of its text, he will kill him and everyone connected to him. Unsol nods in agreement and clasps his hands. After that, the master introduces himself, saying his name is Hyol Gumgang. Unsol thinks to himself, wondering why the name of a Dharma monk, a Buddhist name, contains an ominous word like blood. Hyol Gumgang turns his back to him and asks him if he knows the difference between the internal energy cultivation techniques of the Orthodox faction and the demonic path. Unsol replies that he doesn't know. Hyol Gumgang begins to explain, clarifying that the techniques of the Orthodox faction, like the energy flow and breath control method he mentioned, use natural methods to build internal energy in the human body. He continues his explanation, clarifying that the demonic path, in contrast, will use any method as long as it builds true energy. For this reason, they can accumulate vast amounts of true energy early on, but he warns that these methods conflict with the body and the principles of martial arts, as they are a reflection of nature. As a result, after a long time, the Orthodox faction overwhelmingly surpasses them in the purity of their energy and their level of internal power. However, Hyol Geumgang reveals that the art of the reflective mind, Pangyok Simbeop, that he will pass on to Unsol, is completely free from the limitations of demonic martial arts. He describes this technique as the deepest and most superior among all cultivation techniques in the world. He shows his hand and adds that greatness always comes with a price. Hyol Geumgang reveals that the process of mastering the art of the reflective mind was so painful that he chewed and swallowed his own fingers. He explains that only the talented who can endure this level of indescribable pain can obtain a body perfectly synchronized with the circulation of his energy and the flow of his kai and blood. He tells his story, that he was a master at Chunryong Temple in Yunnan, but he was falsely accused of breaking the vow of not killing. His internal energy was destroyed, and he was expelled. After that, the Nangya Pavilion helped him while he was recovering his internal energy, and in return for this favor, he promised to pass on his cultivation technique. Hyol Gumgang tells Unsol that if he fails to master the art of the reflective mind, it means the master has failed to fulfill his promise. Therefore, he will give him a test. He announces that he will now use the energy of the art of the reflective mind to open all 365 acupoints in Unsol's body at once. He explains that to learn this art, there must be no trace of impurities in the kai and blood. He warns Unsol that these points are usually opened one by one over a long period, and since they will open them all at once, an unimaginable pain will sweep over him. Hyol Geumgang gives him a chance to back out, telling him to give up if he doesn't have the confidence. But Unsol answers firmly that he will do it. The master smiles and says, "Good, don't regret this." Hyol Geumgang shouts as he unleashes his immense golden energy, directing it towards Unsol. The energy completely envelops Unsol, and the master thinks that opening acupoints always brings pain like scraping bones with a knife. Hyol Geumgang wonders how long this confidence of Unsol's will last, but he is surprised. Unsol stands still, his hair flying from the energy, and he doesn't scream. He doesn't even groan. The master notices that the sweat pouring off him doesn't have any foul odor at all. Hyol Gumgang realizes the amazing truth, that this boy had no impurities in his acupoints from the beginning. Unsol stands still after the process is over. Hyol Gumgang looks at him and starts to laugh quietly, then his laughter erupts. He asks Bo Unsol if that is his full name, and Unsol replies yes. Hyul Gumgang announces enthusiastically that starting today, he will pass on the Pangyok Simbayop, art of the reflective mind, to him. 6 months pass. Unsol stands on the mountaintop while Hyul Gumgang lifts a huge boulder with his hand and sends it flying through the air. The massive boulder heads towards him at great speed. Bo Unsol stands without dodging or retreating, and the boulder shatters when it hits his body, the broken rock scattering everywhere. He appears, his body now muscular, without a single scratch or injury from the boulder. His master watches him lift a huge boulder and acknowledges that he has definitely reached the first stage. The master calls out to Bo Unsol, who now stands with a strong physique and long hair flowing in the wind. Master Hyul Gumgang thinks that it took him 3 years to reach this stage, while Unsol accomplished it in just 6 months. He admits that Unsol's progress has exceeded his expectations. He notes that thanks to learning the cultivation technique, the true energy Unsol had stored has spread through his pathways, stimulating his suppressed physical growth, making him healthier and with a completely different appearance. The master tells Unsol that his training time has begun, and the latter agrees. Unsol sits in a meditative posture, thinking that thanks to his master, he reached the first stage quickly, but he realizes this is not enough, as the art of the reflective mind consists of 8 stages. He resolves to reach at least the 2nd stage before he leaves this mountain. While he is meditating, Master Hyul Gumgang feels something strange emanating from Unsol. He suddenly opens his eyes, wondering about this feeling. Energy flows within Unsol, and the master realizes with shock that this is the purity of muscles and bones. It is the 2nd stage. His master watches him and thinks that reaching the 2nd stage means reorganizing the bones and muscles to reach an optimal state for increasing the body's strength, but this radical transformation also puts enormous and dangerous stress on the entire body. He shouts at Unsol, telling him to clear his mind and focus. He feels worried, as Unsol's body cannot control its true energy due to the sudden change, and if this continues, he will end up with fatal internal injuries. He decides he has no choice but to use his original core energy to help him, and places his hand on him. Unsol closes his eyes as the energy transfers to him. He opens his eyes, astonished by this amazing energy he feels. He turns and calls out to his master. The exhausted him asks if he poured his true energy into him, and wonders why he would do something like that for him. The master dismisses Unsol's concern, telling him that if he doesn't master the art of the reflective mind, he, the humble monk, won't be able to leave the Nangya pavilion. Unsol thinks that his master seems scary and speaks rudely, but he is actually a kind person. He tells him he will never forget this favor, but the master, staggering slightly, refuses. He asks him to forget his existence. Unsol remembers his master Sawu's words, that it is always best to forget favors and grudges. He wonders why everyone tells him the same thing. The master tells him that if he truly wants to repay him, he must one day reach enlightenment and attain the 8th stage, the state of the great origin. He explains that this is the only way to repay the favor, revealing that he himself lacked the talent and could only barely reach the 5th stage. Unsol looks at him with understanding and tells him that he understands. He tells him that now that he has reached the 2nd stage, he no longer needs him to teach him. What Unsol needs now is not to master the art of the reflective mind, but to build a solid foundation in martial arts. He orders him to go to Cheongmyeong Terrace at the far end of the Nangya Pavilion Academy and to train his movement techniques there. Unsol is silent as his master Hyul Gumgang tells him to go. He bows to him, wishing him to be safe and well. Hyul Gumgang watches him leave and silently wishes him the same. 3 months later, 2 men are sitting in a room in the Nangya Pavilion chatting. One tells the other that the Changshan battalion returned this morning, and his companion asks him if they went to eliminate the Cheongryong faction. The man confirms that those bastards got what they deserved after messing with a disciple from the main house, expressing his satisfaction that their combat unit, the Changshan battalion, was sent to deal with any faction that opposes the main house. The second man wonders if the Bong-un Brigade, the intelligence unit, will return soon. As he speaks, several fast shadows appear outside. The first one notices this sarcastically, saying, "Speak of the devil," and complains that they always act like spies instead of using the front gate. Men in dark clothes land gracefully on the roof. One of them stands on the roof, looking at the horizon. Another person appears from behind him and comments sarcastically on his rooftop stance, saying he's standing as if he wants someone to paint him. The other person calls out to the one on the roof, demanding he come to the hall since he's back, instead of wandering outside. It is revealed that the man on the roof is Baek Yun, the leader of the Bong-un Brigade of the Nangya Pavilion. He addresses him by the title Deputy Pavilion Master. Dan Chung, the deputy master, replies that he told him to call him by his name when they are alone. Baek Yun strictly refuses, asserting that he cannot let him mess with the pavilion's discipline, which is already too lax. Baek Yun tells the deputy master that his arrival is timely, as he was just about to look for him. He confronts him angrily, wondering why he brought a talented demonic disciple from Hell Island here. especially since he was against the 10 demon disciples plan from the beginning, and how he intercepted a talent that was on its way to the Huawu sword sect. Dan Chung calmly explains that he didn't bring him, but that the boy chose to come to them, flatly refusing the Huawu sword sect's offer. Baek Yun is shocked at the idea that a once-in-a-generation talent chose their dilapidated pavilion. Dan Chung agrees, and mentions that he almost got into an all-out fight with the sword demon, Wee Hyuk Gon, over it. He smiles, admitting he admires the courage of the boy, Un Sol, who wanted to join their pavilion of his own free will. Baek Yun remains serious, pointing out that because of this incident, the Huawu sword sect refrained from choosing any demonic disciple at all, and that the sect leader expressed his extreme displeasure. Dan Chung nods his head in understanding. Baek Yun continues to reprimand him, reminding him that their pavilion has been under the demonic palace's surveillance for a long time, and is already treated as an outcast sect. Dan Chung interrupts him, saying he has spent too much time in the outside world, and reminding him that the goal of the Nangya Pavilion is to reach the pinnacle of martial arts, not to control the Murim world. Baek Yun dismisses this as mere idealism. He calms down a bit and tells him there is an urgent matter to attend to. He asks for the whereabouts of this person who has become their pavilion's successor, and adds that he heard Un Sol is in a situation that could lead to him being stripped of his status as one of the 10 demon disciples. Meanwhile, Un Sol is shown training, he and his comrades, to run on the water's surface, jumping and moving with amazing lightness and agility on the water. Un Sol remembers that before the training began, an old man introduced himself to him as Go Wool, formerly known as the Great Thief, Shadowless Ultimate Speed. Go Wool explains that the technique he will teach him is a physical movement martial art that integrates movement techniques and footwork, and he named it Shadowless Ultimate Speed after his own title. He warns him that every disciple from the Nangya Pavilion who tried to learn this technique ended up crippled, unable to keep up with its changes, but he tells him he will see how he performs. After just 1 month, Go Wool stands shocked as he watches him move like lightning across the water's surface, wondering in disbelief how he managed to reach the 3rd level of achievement in such a short time. He announces with a laugh that he will leave the place since he has finally found someone to inherit his technique. He tells Un Sol that he has learned all the basics, and that he must now refine them through real combat. In the present, Dan Chung and Baek Yun watch Un Sol moving skillfully on the water. Dan Chung identifies the technique as Master Go's, Shadowless Ultimate Speed, and Baek Yun comments that this martial art cannot be mastered in a short time. He wonders if Un Sol has done nothing but train in movement techniques since his arrival. Dan Chung laughs, denying it, and explaining that he only arrived 6 months ago, and that last month he was on Cheoljiang Peak, learning the art of the reflective mind from Heol Geumgang. Baek Yun deduces that this confirms the rumor that Un Sol mastered the Wandering Beast Path on Hell Island in just 15 days, which Dan Chung confirms. The latter reveals that the reason for this was that Sa Wu gave him all of his superior spring spiritual water, which likely opened his supernatural nerve plexus early. Baek Yun doubts that the Wandering Beast Path could be mastered for that reason alone, and mentions that the story of the number of demon disciples increasing from 12 to 14 because of him also seemed ridiculous. He asks Dan Chung if the pavilion master will be coming out of his seclusion soon, but Baek Yun denies it, pointing out that he is stuck handling all the administrative work as a result. He confirms that the demonic palace is the one that imposed the 10 demon disciples project, and that the 10 demonic sects are full of complaints. Dan Chung explains that unlike the Nangya Pavilion, where survival of the fittest rules, the other sects already have designated successors, and they must have been shocked when they were ordered to pass on their martial arts to these new disciples. He clarifies that the project's primary goal was to create assassins to eliminate the masters of the orthodox faction. Baek Yun replies that he knew this, but it seems some demonic sects didn't understand the intent, and sent their pre-selected successors to participate in the competition. Dan Chung considers that this isn't a bad idea, as if these successors are talented, they would be chosen anyway. Baek Yun agrees that this is what would have happened under normal circumstances. He reveals that Un Sol caused a problem by killing Gang Mu Ryan, the only son of the master of Baek Masa. Dan Chung dismisses the matter, reminding him that all sects agreed to the terms of the 3rd stage, fight to the death, and that the son's death was unfortunate but unavoidable. Baek Yun warns that Baek Masa isn't the only one with a problem with him. He explains that the Huawu sword sect is very angry because he learned one of their advanced sword arts, Dual Electromagnetic Thunder Sword. He adds that the sword demon Wee Hyuk Gon is demanding severe punishment, and that instructor Chun Un-Guang, who taught Un Sol, has already been stripped of his position and placed in solitary confinement. Dan Chung scoffs that they punished the instructor and now they want to punish the disciple. He calls it despicable, and asks for the specific demands of Baek Masa and the Huawu sword sect. Baek Yun replies that the first demand is to summon Un Sol to the demonic palace to test his qualifications. The second demand is to permanently ban him from using the sword. Dan Chung flatly refuses this, considering it ridiculous to demand that a disciple from the main house, Nangya Pavilion, and one of the 10 demon disciples stop using the sword. He watches him finish his training by jumping to the top of the waterfall, then lands in front of him and Baek Yun, noting that the deputy pavilion master was watching him. Dan Chung praises Un Sol, noting that he has mastered the movement technique well. At that point, Baek Yun turns to him and asks to confirm his identity. Are you the disciple of the main house? The demonic disciple? Dan Chung introduces Un Sol to the leader of the Bong Un Brigade and the pavilion chief, Baek Yun. Bo Un Sol greets brigade leader Baek with a respectful bow, and he returns the greeting. Baek Yun starts to talk about the urgent matter, but Dan Chung suddenly interrupts him. He downplays the matter, saying it's not worth bothering Un Sol with. Un Sol intervenes, announcing that since all of this happened because of him, he will be the one to take responsibility. Dan Chung groans, realizing he had heard everything they said. Un Sol apologizes, explaining that he was using the heart's eye and empty wave of the beast path. Baek Yun is surprised, wondering how he could use a sensory technique based on vibrations in a state of calm, while simultaneously performing a complex movement technique. Un Sol confirms it, explaining that he tried to evoke the beast path by tracing the ripples that spread on the water's surface while using the technique. Dan Chung smiles at the shocked Baek Yun, commenting on how amazing Un Sol is, and the latter agrees. Baek Yun clenches his fist and thinks that if Un Sol is this much of a genius, then maybe they should trust him with this matter. Dan Chung rejects the idea in shock. He shouts at Baek Yun, wondering if he means to send Un Sol to the demonic palace for that sham test, calling it a dirty trick to kill him. Baek Yun explains that the demonic palace's goal is likely just to help the master of Baekmasa save face after losing his son, and that they have no real intention of killing him. That's why the test is being held at the demonic palace, and not in the territories of Baekmasa or the Hwawu sword sect. He adds that if they refuse this offer, things will become so troublesome that the pavilion master will have to come out of his seclusion. However, Dan Chung remains hesitant to send a novice like him. Un Sol interrupts them with a clear declaration that he will go. He assures the two astonished men that he will go to the demonic palace. He justifies his decision, saying that as the brigade leader mentioned, all they want is to save face, and killing someone insignificant like him won't benefit their reputation. And more importantly, as a disciple of the Nangya Pavilion, he has no intention of running away from a fight. Dan Chung puts his hand on his face in despair, while Baek Yun nods his head, acknowledging that Un Sol is right and that this was bound to happen sooner or later. He suggests accepting the demand now so it won't be used against them again. Dan Chung adds that if Un Sol passes the test, they must get a promise from them to drop this issue completely with the master of Baekmasa and the Hwawu sword sect. He announces that on the condition of getting that promise, he will allow the disciple of Nangya Pavilion, Bo Un Sol, to undergo the test, and Un Sol agrees. As he walks through the demonic palace, he remembers that when he first came here, he was just an undertaker who knew nothing about martial arts. But now, he is walking in the demonic palace as the successor of the Nangya Pavilion. A guard leads him to a building, telling him that this is the Manbakdang, known as the mind of the demonic palace, and that someone inside will guide him. Un Sol enters the building, thinking that this place is responsible for all the operations and tactics of the demonic palace, and rivals the main strategy hall in the Murim Alliance. He proceeds down the hallway and opens a door, realizing that here he will find out what his test is. As soon as the door opens, Un Sol is greatly surprised by what he sees in front of him. Inside the all-encompassing pavilion, a man sits behind a low table while an attendant stands at his side. The attendant leans in and informs him that Mr. Bu from the Wandering Beast Pavilion has arrived. Across from them stands Buyil, offering a respectful greeting and identifying the seated man as the all-encompassing pavilion master. He introduces himself with quiet formality. Buonsil. The man accepts the greeting and names himself Baek Jianin. A flicker of surprised approval lifts his expression as he remarks that Uniel's chief feels far more formidable than the rumors ever suggested Demon Palace all-encompassing pavilion master Baek Jianin. He taps his index fingers lightly on the table, a steady rhythm that hints at underlying tension. He asks whether Yiniel has heard about recent events, adding that the Demon Palace has been forced into an awkward position because of what happened, that they cannot simply ignore the demands of the 10 demonic sects. Yinsil raises a quiet question in return. Are the Demon Palace and the 10 demonic sects separate entities? Jianin studies him, then asks if no one has explained this to him, noting with mild disbelief that the Wandering Beast Pavilion seems unaware of the broader movements in the Miram. He begins to clarify. The Demon Palace, he explains, is a union formed by the 10 demonic sects. One cannot fully separate the two, yet they are not the same either. Traditionally, someone from one of those 10 sects becomes the Demon Palace Master, yet the former Palace Master was not. And beyond that, not every demonic path sect is on friendly terms with the Demon Palace. Uniel listens and quietly acknowledges. He sees the relationship between the palace and the sects is merely cooperative, and many demonic path sects dislike the Demon Palace altogether. Still maintaining his easy smile, Jianan continues. He admits that truthfully, the 10 Demon Masters' plan was never meant to choose successors for the sections. Its true purpose was to cultivate individuals capable of eliminating the orthodox martial masters. His smile fades into a steady level expression as he states the true nature of the competition. The 10 Demon Masters competition was devised by the Demon Palace to eliminate the upper ranks of the Orthodox Murim Alliance. Yinxiel quietly takes the seat across the table. As Jianan goes on, the 10 demonic sects originally rejected the idea, but the Demon Palace persisted in contacting them until they eventually sent disciples. And during that very competition, those disciples died. A grim shadow tightens Jianan's features as he adds that their deaths were because of Uniel. Now that Uniel is seated properly, Jianan presses on. Because of all this, the Demon Palace is stuck in an uncomfortable position. Uniel listens without a single ripple crossing his expression. Jianan explains that this is why he wanted to meet Uniel to punish him under the guise of an exam. He asks whether Uniel is aware. Uniel responds that he is impressed by Uniel's steadiness. Jianan interlaces his fingers and remarks that Uniel seems to have come prepared. Uniel again answers yes, placing his own fingers together on the table and stating that he is fine with whatever this exam turns out to be. Jianan's expression shifts. Thoughtful, almost delighted. He tells Uniel that this is acceptable. Then he straightens and claps once, announcing that he has talked long enough and that they should move on to the main point. Rising from his seat, he circles with a slow, assessing stride, gaze fixed on Uniel. He explains that the Fire Rain's sword sect and the White Demon Temple have done Uniel a favor. Uniel, puzzled, asks what he means. Jianan reveals that they have granted him access to the 10,000 Demonic Truth Pavilion, the martial arts text archive of the Demon Palace. He lifts a plaque and shows it. It is the golden plaque, the item required to enter the pavilion. It grants access to the first of the pavilion's 3 floors. The first floor is the lowest grade, yet it alone contains 25,000 martial arts texts, an enormous advantage. But Jianan adds that this also means there is almost no chance of Yinxiel passing the exam safely. That is why they are doing him this favor, so that no one can accuse them of mistreating him. He begins to reveal the exam. Yinxiel waits, nerves taut beneath his composed stare. Jianan then states it clearly. Yinxiel must endure 5 attacks from a martial master chosen by the White Demon Temple. With a small smile, Jianshan extends the plaque toward him and reminds him that the head instructor surrendered his position during the competition to ensure Uniel's passing. He says he asked the head instructor repeatedly why he did that, but all he ever received as an answer was, "You will find out." As the plaque nears Uniel's hand, Jianan adds that he hopes to witness the answer himself. Later, after leaving Jianan's office, Uniel steps into the hallway. A faint sound draws his attention, and he turns. Walking toward him is instructor Jean. Recognition sparks instantly between them. Jean greets him by name with an easy warmth. Upon reaching him, instructor Jean says he has heard the news that Uniel must be here for the exam. Yinxiel confirms and asks what brings Jean here. Both turn their gazes down the hallway Jean came from. Jean explains that he has many connections within the all-encompassing pavilion. He helped the head instructor on Hell Island, acting as a substitute for the pavilion master, who was absent at the time. Uniel nods. He understands the plaque in his hand catches Jin's eye. Jean points at it and asks if Uniel is visiting the 10,000 Demonic Truth Pavilion for the exam. The suddenness almost catches Uniel off guard, but he answers yes. Jean rubs his chin thoughtfully, then offers advice because Uniel was once his student. He tells him that the Jianggu is a frightening place, that no good deed is ever offered without motive. There is always some hidden intent or scheme behind it, and it is the same here. But with a light smile, he pats Uniel's shoulder and tells him that even so, he is sure Uniel can find an opportunity amid the danger. Trees grow from the roots, he reminds him. He urges Uniel to keep that in mind and do his best. Uniel bows with fist to palm and thanks him. Jean accepts it, and smiling once more says he hopes Uniel will perform well. Under bright daylight, Uniel now stands before a massive metal door carved into a mountain. A hush of a slips from him as he takes in its presence. This is the 10,000 Demonic Truth Pavilion. He steps forward and pushes the door open. Inside, he stops at the entrance. Overwhelmed by the vastness before him, light spills across towering shelves and endless rows of texts. His jaw loosens and a faint woe escapes before he even realizes it. He walks in, scanning the shelves, noting that this is no ordinary library. The thought strikes him. Are all these books martial arts techniques? He halts at a nearby shelf and starts there. He picks one book, then another, then more. 1 becomes 2, 2 become 8, stacked in his arms before he even notices. His awareness snaps back and he realizes the truth. It's a trap. These may be secret martial arts techniques, but none are things he can learn in a single day. If he gets too excited and tries to absorb everything, he will waste the precious time he has. That must be their intention. The Fire Rain Sword Sect and White Demon Temple are trying to scatter his focus, so he recalls instructor Jin's words and steels himself. He cannot be shaken. He must find an opportunity inside the danger. He sets down every book he gathered and walks deeper into the pavilion, repeating Jin's words silently. A tree grows from the roots. He pauses, focusing sharply. The phrase loops in his thoughts. Root, my roots. A realization strikes. He activates his heightened senses and sprints between shelves, searching rapidly. This one is wrong. That one is wrong. Not this, not that. His eyes scan without resting. Then his gaze lands on a specific spine, and something in him sparks in recognition. His eyes widen. He reaches into the shelf and pulls it free. The title reads, Wandering Beast Reversal. Excitement breaks across his face as he sees it. There truly is something from the Wandering Beast Pavilion after all. He flips through the pages, mind racing, wondering what kind of technique it contains. Then his thoughts stop dead. Shock storms across his features, mouth parting, eyes widening as the contents reveal themselves to him.